For countless millennia, they reigned supreme across Europe, flourishing in environments that would prove lethal to us within mere days. Their prowess in hunting colossal creatures, limited only by rudimentary wooden spears, and their sheer physical might. These were no mere brethren to our own species. They were aberrations of nature, the formidable Neanderthals. If the narratives shared here resonate with you, consider subscribing. Feel free to comment with your geographical location and the current time, as it's always fascinating to observe the global reach of these discussions. We've had participants from Helsinki and Houston engage with the same content, one experiencing tomorrow while the other is already in yesterday. Do you consider yourself robust? You pale in comparison. An average Neanderthal possessed the strength to shatter your hand effortlessly. Their skeletal structures were more robust, their musculature denser, their inherent power beyond the comprehension of modern humans. For years, our perception painted them as rudimentary cave dwellers, stooped brutes lacking the intelligence or adaptability we so readily attributed to ourselves. Yet, that depiction was profoundly flawed, demonstrably incorrect. Recent revelations have comprehensively dismantled our prior understanding of these ancient hominids. Not only did they surpass us in almost every physical aspect, but their cranial capacity was also greater. They engineered intricate implements, mastered the control of fire, created artistic expressions, and endured environmental extremities that would decimate present-day human populations. Their existence wasn't merely about subsistence. They thrived in some of Earth's most unforgiving landscapes. What then accounted for their extraordinary physical constitution? And if they were so remarkable, why did they cease to be? Why did they fade into oblivion while our lineage prospered? The answers to these questions will fundamentally alter your perspective on human evolution. The saga of the Neanderthals commences approximately 400,000 years ago, when a segment of early humans became geographically isolated in Europe during an extensive glacial epoch. Severed from contact with other human groups in Africa, these European populations began to develop unique characteristics, perfectly calibrating them for the brutal conditions of Ice Age Europe. Their physiques evolved to be more compact and powerful, not as a sign of primitivism, but as a manifestation of specialization into highly effective survival mechanisms. Upon examining a Neanderthal skeletal frame, the immediate impression is one of unparalleled bone density. Their bones were considerably thicker and more substantial than ours. A Neanderthal femur, or thigh bone, could withstand stresses that would snap a modern human leg as easily as a dry twig. Their upper and lower limbs exhibit pronounced muscle insertion points, areas where their potent musculature connected to the skeletal structure. Paleoanthropologists who scrutinize these points can ascertain that Neanderthals possessed exceptionally powerful biceps, triceps, and forearm muscles. However, their superiority wasn't confined to mere strength. Their entire bodily architecture was distinct. They possessed broad, barrel-shaped chests, significantly wider than our own, particularly in the lower rib cage. This expanded thoracic cavity afforded them larger lung capacity and likely a more efficient cardiovascular system, crucial adaptations for high exertion activities in frigid climates. Their pelvic structures were also wider, establishing a lower center of gravity that would have conferred exceptional stability and power. When observing a Neanderthal cranium, The most striking feature is the pronounced supraorbital ridge above the eye sockets. This bony prominence served a dual purpose. It supported their larger facial structure and provided augmented protection for their eyes. Their nasal apertures were substantially larger than ours, featuring wider nostrils and a more prominent bridge. This was not an arbitrary development, but a sophisticated adaptation to frigid atmospheric conditions. A larger nasal cavity with an increased internal surface area facilitated the warming and humidification of inhaled frigid air before it reached the lungs, thereby preventing the kind of tissue damage that modern humans would sustain in comparable circumstances without technological aid. Their cranial anatomy also included enlarged sinuses, further contributing to the warming of inhaled air. These were not rudimentary features, but advanced adaptations that enabled Neanderthals to flourish in environments that would prove fatal to most contemporary humans. Their mandibular structure represented another evolutionary triumph. Neanderthals lacked a distinct chin. Their lower jaw simply receded from the teeth, without the protruding mentum characteristic of our species. Yet, what they lacked in a chin, they compensated for with remarkable jaw strength. Their mandibles were thicker and more robust than ours, capable of exerting immense biting force. The wear patterns observed on their teeth indicate frequent use of their mouths as a third appendage, holding animal hides or other materials while engaged in manipulative tasks. Their dentition was also unique. Their incisors, the anterior teeth, were larger and displayed distinctive wear characteristics absent in modern humans. Some researchers posit that they routinely employed their front teeth for gripping and manipulating animal pelts during preparation. Such an action would swiftly damage the teeth of a modern human. Collectively, these anatomical distinctions lead to an unequivocal conclusion. Neanderthals were physical powerhouses. But precisely how potent were they? Scientists have analyzed the muscle attachment sites on Neanderthal skeletal remains to estimate their strength relative to modern humans, yielding astonishing figures. The average Neanderthal likely possessed upper body strength at least 1.5 times greater than that of a typical modern human male. Certain estimations suggest their arm strength could have been double that of even highly trained modern athletes. Their grip strength would have been astronomically high by our standards. A typical modern human male exhibits a grip strength of approximately 80 to 120 pounds of pressure. The average Neanderthal likely exerted well over 200 pounds of crushing force with each hand, capable of easily fragmenting objects that would necessitate tools for modern humans. This extraordinary physical power was not merely for display, it was integral to their survival strategy. Unlike later human groups who developed specialized projectile weaponry for distant engagement, Neanderthals were hunters who engaged in close quarters combat. They fashioned robust thrusting spears, designed not for propulsion but for direct immersion into large, formidable prey at close range. Contemplate this for a moment. Neanderthals hunted creatures such as woolly rhinoceroses, cave bears, and mammoths, colossal beasts that could easily overpower a human. And they did so at extremely close proximity. This was not a limitation of their cognitive capacity to devise more effective hunting methods. Rather, it was a deliberate strategy leveraging their physical advantages and perfectly suited to their ecological context. The physical evidence of this high-stakes hunting methodology is inscribed upon their very bones. Neanderthal skeletons bear patterns of injury comparable to those observed in contemporary rodeo performers, displaying healed fractures distributed across their bodies, particularly impacting the head, neck, and upper torso, precisely the kind of trauma expected from close encounters with large, dangerous fauna. One study revealed that approximately 80% of adult Neanderthals exhibited evidence of at least one significant healed injury. A well-known instance is the old man of La Chapelle-aux-Saints, a Neanderthal who lived to an estimated age of 40, considered elderly by Paleolithic standards. His skeletal remains exhibit numerous healed fractures, including fractured ribs, a crushed toe, knee damage, and dental abscesses. Despite these debilitating injuries, he survived for years thereafter, suggesting a degree of communal care during his recovery. This was not a gentle world they inhabited, and their physical remains attest to their direct confrontation with its harsh realities. Their strength and hunting techniques constituted only a fraction of what rendered Neanderthals exceptional. Their physiologies were also exquisitely adapted to endure extreme cold, surpassing mere anatomical modifications like larger nasal cavities. Their entire body proportions differed from ours in ways that optimized heat retention. Modern humans, having evolved in Africa, developed body proportions conducive to heat dissipation. Long limbs with a high surface area to volume ratio, facilitating the expulsion of excess heat. Neanderthals, by contrast, evolved the opposite morphology. They possessed shorter limbs and more compact builds, minimizing the surface area through which they could lose heat. This resulted in a physique resembling that of modern populations residing in extreme cold climates, such as traditional Inuit communities, albeit with even more pronounced characteristics. This thermoregulatory adaptation was not merely about comfort, it was fundamentally about survival. During the frigid periods of glacial advancement, the compact muscular bodies of Neanderthals would have been significantly more efficient at retaining body heat than those of modern humans. Consequently, they could subsist with less technological reliance, fewer layers of protective clothing, reduced fuel consumption for fires, and a lower caloric intake required to maintain core body temperature. Speaking of sustenance, Neanderthals had substantial dietary requirements. Their powerful musculature, larger brains, and the frigid environments they inhabited all necessitated an immense caloric intake. Scientific estimates suggest that Neanderthals would have required between 3,500 and 5,000 calories daily, approximately double the intake of a sedentary modern human, and comparable to the caloric consumption of Olympic athletes during rigorous training. Where did this abundant energy originate? Primarily, it was derived from animal flesh. Isotopic analysis of Neanderthal skeletal remains indicates they occupied the apex of the carnivorous food chain, obtaining the majority of their protein from large herbivores like deer, bison, wild horses, and even woolly rhinoceroses and mammoths. In numerous locations, they appear to have specialized in hunting reindeer during their seasonal migrations, intercepting the herds at strategically advantageous points within the landscape. This is not to suggest they abstained from plant consumption entirely. Recent analyses of dental plaque from Neanderthal teeth have yielded evidence of various plant-based foodstuffs, including grains, tubers, and even medicinal flora. However, the overarching dietary pattern points towards a regimen heavily dominated by meat, particularly in northern latitudes during colder periods when plant resources would have been scarce. This meat-centric diet was not a matter of preference, but a fundamental necessity dictated by their environment and metabolism. The biting cold of glacial Europe rendered plant foods seasonal and limited in availability. High-energy animal products, encompassing not just muscle tissue but also fat, marrow, and organ meats, provided the concentrated caloric sustenance Neanderthals required to fuel their robust bodies through harsh winters. Their success in acquiring such vast quantities of meat serves as a testament to their extraordinary physical capabilities and hunting prowess. Archaeological evidence recovered from Neanderthal sites reveals them to be skilled and strategic hunters, adept at dispatching the largest and most dangerous fauna of Ice Age Europe. At numerous excavation sites across Europe, archaeologists have unearthed butchered remains spanning from reindeer and wild horses to woolly mammoths, rhinoceroses, and even juvenile mammoths. The distribution of cut marks on these skeletal fragments indicates that Neanderthals were not merely scavengers, but systematically processed entire carcasses, extracting not only muscle meat, but also vital fat reserves, marrow, and other essential nutrients. In certain locations, such as the excavation at Pinsevent in France, evidence suggests that Neanderthals engaged in coordinated mass hunts of bison, driving herds into natural topographical traps where they could be efficiently eliminated. At Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, evidence indicates that Neanderthals may have employed cliffs as a method of hunting mammoths, potentially driving herds over the edges. However, these were not simple opportunistic hunters. The available evidence suggests they possessed a sophisticated understanding of animal behavior and meticulously planned their hunting expeditions. At many sites, the faunal remains indicate a focus on prime-aged adult animals, the most formidable, but also the most nutritionally valuable targets. This selective hunting strategy demanded not only formidable physical power, but also advanced knowledge and foresight. Their hunting technology, while perhaps not as diverse as that of later human groups, proved remarkably effective for their specific needs. Wooden spears unearthed at Schöningen in Germany, dating back approximately 300,000 years, demonstrate that these were not crude implements, but carefully crafted weapons. The spears were fashioned from spruce wood, with the weight precisely balanced towards the front, akin to modern javelins. The tips were meticulously charred to enhance their hardness, producing weapons capable of penetrating the thick hides of large animals. Perhaps more surprising to many researchers is the discovery that Neanderthals sometimes utilized projectile weaponry. At the site of Abri-du-Maras in France, microscopic analysis of stone points revealed impact damage and traces of binding materials, suggesting their use as projectile tips, possibly for thrown spears. While not as sophisticated as the bows and atlatls of later human populations, these findings indicate that Neanderthals were not exclusively limited to close-range engagements. Possibly the most remarkable aspect of their technological repertoire was their mastery of adhesive substances. At multiple sites across Europe, researchers have uncovered evidence that Neanderthals produced complex adhesives derived from birch bark tar, a process requiring precisely controlled heating to extract the viscous resin without combustion. They employed these adhesives to affix stone points to wooden shafts, thereby fabricating more effective composite tools. The intricate nature of creating birch bark tar is such that some archaeologists have attempted to replicate the process using only technologies accessible to Neanderthals, with limited success. The demanding physical nature of the Neanderthal lifestyle left another discernible imprint on their skeletal remains: asymmetry. Studies of Neanderthal arm bones reveal a consistent pattern of significantly greater strength in the right arm compared to the left, a biomechanical signature indicative of repetitive, powerful, right-handed thrusting motions. This observation aligns perfectly with our current understanding of their hunting techniques and provides further substantiation that their extraordinary physical power was not solely a matter of genetic predisposition, but was cultivated through a lifetime of intense physical exertion. We should refrain from viewing Neanderthals as simply a more robust iteration of ourselves. Their entire physiological framework was distinct, meticulously adapted to meet the demands of their specific lifestyle and environment. Their muscle fiber composition likely differed from ours, featuring a higher proportion of fast-twitch fibers optimized for explosive power rather than sustained endurance. Their metabolic rates were elevated. Their cardiovascular systems were more adept at oxygen delivery during periods of intense activity, and their bodies were superior at heat conservation in frigid conditions. These were not rudimentary characteristics, but highly specialized adaptations that propelled Neanderthals to remarkable success within their ecological niche. For over 300,000 years, they thrived in diverse environments, ranging from the Mediterranean basin to the fringes of the Arctic, successfully navigating multiple glacial cycles and abrupt climatic shifts that would have posed formidable challenges even to technologically equipped modern humans. However, their physical prowess did not constitute the entirety of their remarkable nature. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of Neanderthal biology, and the factor that compelled scientists to radically revise their perception of these ancient hominids, was their cerebral capacity. For decades, the prevailing scientific consensus posited that Neanderthals were intellectually subordinate to modern humans. Their distinctive cranial morphology, characterized by an elongated shape and prominent brow ridge, was historically interpreted as evidence of primitive cognitive functions. However, as more complete Neanderthal skulls were unearthed and subjected to detailed analysis, a surprising revelation emerged. Their brains were, in fact, larger than ours. The average Neanderthal cranial volume was approximately 1,600 cubic centimeters, compared to roughly 1,400 cubic centimeters for modern humans. Certain Neanderthal specimens exhibited brain volumes as large as 1,740 cubic centimeters, exceeding even the dimensions of the largest modern human brains. While brain size is not the sole determinant of cognitive ability, internal organization is equally crucial. Detailed studies of Neanderthal endocasts, which are three-dimensional models of the brain derived from the internal cranial shape, have revealed a surprising degree of sophistication. Although their brains were organized somewhat differently from ours, with proportionally larger areas dedicated to visual processing and motor control, they still possessed well-developed frontal lobes, regions associated with higher cognitive functions such as planning, decision-making, and social cognition. The implications of these findings are clear. Neanderthals were not cognitively inferior to modern humans. They were simply different. Their brains were adapted to the specific challenges of their lifestyle and environment, exhibiting enhanced capabilities in areas like spatial awareness, visual processing, and motor control, all critical for hunters navigating complex terrains and engaging formidable prey at close range. This divergence in neural architecture extended to their sensory perception. Studies of Neanderthal skulls suggest they possessed larger orbital cavities than modern humans, potentially indicating enhanced visual acuity, particularly in low light conditions. This would have conferred a significant advantage for hunters operating within the European forests, especially during the extended periods of reduced daylight in winter. Their sense of smell was likely also distinct. The structure of the Neanderthal nasal cavity suggests they may have possessed a more acute olfactory sense than modern humans. Another advantage for hunters tracking prey and detecting potential dangers. Even their auditory capabilities may have been adapted to their specific lifestyle. Research on Neanderthal ear ossicles suggests they may have possessed different auditory capacities compared to modern humans, potentially with heightened sensitivity to certain frequency ranges beneficial for detecting prey or facilitating communication within forested environments. Collectively, these sensory adaptations paint a picture not of primitive beings, but of highly specialized hominids whose entire biological makeup was exquisitely attuned to the demands of their existence as Ice Age hunters of European forests and steppes. Furthermore, the evidence for their cognitive sophistication extends far beyond mere cranial capacity. The archaeological record unequivocally demonstrates that Neanderthals engaged in behaviors previously considered exclusive to modern humans, behaviors indicative of abstract thought, foresight, and cultural transmission. They controlled fire, not solely for warmth, but for culinary purposes, transforming tough, fibrous foodstuffs into more digestible forms, and potentially extracting a greater caloric yield from their diet. They engineered complex tools requiring multi-stage fabrication processes, including composite implements that integrated various materials. They demonstrated care for their injured and elderly, evidenced by numerous skeletal remains exhibiting healed fractures that would have necessitated prolonged convalescence and support to survive. Perhaps most startling to many researchers is the evidence that they created art and symbolic artifacts. Across numerous European sites, archaeologists have unearthed indications of Neanderthal artistic expression, including pigments processed for decorative use, shell beads seemingly employed as adornments, and even cave paintings predating the arrival of modern humans in Europe. At Bruniquel Cave in France, archaeologists discovered something truly extraordinary: a meticulously constructed circular edifice fashioned from fractured stalagmites, situated deep within the cave where natural light was entirely absent, dated to 176,000 years ago, a period when only Neanderthals inhabited Europe. This structure suggests a deliberate excursion into subterranean environments, employing fire for illumination and constructing organized formations for purposes that remain speculative, perhaps ritualistic or social in nature. These actions are inconsistent with the behavior of simple brutes. They represent the activities of complex, intelligent beings possessing rich social lives and deeply ingrained cultural traditions, compelling us to fundamentally reevaluate our understanding of who the Neanderthals truly were. Therefore, if Neanderthals were so physically formidable, so impeccably adapted to their environment, and so cognitively advanced, why did they vanish? Why did our ancestors, with their comparatively more delicate physiques and similar cerebral capacities, survive while the mighty Neanderthals perished? The explanation is not straightforward, and scientists continue to debate the precise factors contributing to Neanderthal extinction. But several key elements likely played a significant role in their demise. A critical factor was climatic volatility. Approximately 40,000 years ago, Europe experienced a series of abrupt and extreme climatic fluctuations, a phenomenon known as Heinrich events. These sudden periods of intense cold would have drastically transformed the natural environments that the Neanderthals depended on, possibly leading to a significant decrease in the populations of their favored game animals and making it much harder to maintain their diet, which was rich in high-calorie meat. Another contributing factor was the arrival of anatomically modern humans in Europe. Beginning around 45,000 years ago, these newcomers introduced different tools, distinct hunting approaches, and potentially different societal structures that might have provided them with competitive advantages in specific settings. There is scant evidence of direct conflict between Neanderthals and modern humans. No mass graves or skeletal remains bearing injuries from weapons have been found that would indicate warfare or genocide. However, competition for resources, even if it was nonviolent, could have gradually led to a decline in Neanderthal populations. Illness may have also played a part. Modern humans, migrating from Africa, likely brought pathogens to which Neanderthals had no prior exposure and consequently no immunity. These new diseases could have had a devastating impact on Neanderthal communities, already weakened by climate shifts and competition. Perhaps most remarkably, we now understand that Neanderthals did not entirely vanish. Genetic analyses of contemporary human populations outside of Africa reveal that the majority of us carry somewhere between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA within our genetic makeup. This is clear proof that our ancestors did not merely compete with Neanderthals, they also reproduced with them. This interbreeding suggests that rather than being completely superseded, Neanderthals might have been partially integrated into the expanding modern human population as their numbers dwindled due to environmental pressures and competition. The remaining Neanderthals may have increasingly joined modern human groups, their unique genetic legacy gradually becoming diluted but never completely erased. Consequently, the story of the Neanderthals is not simply one of defeat and extinction. It is an intricate narrative of adaptation, resilience, and eventual transformation. Their formidable physical strength and specialized adaptations made them incredibly successful for hundreds of thousands of years, a duration far exceeding that of our own species' existence. And elements of their biological makeup persist in many of us today. The Neanderthals were not failed humans or evolutionary dead ends. They were remarkable beings whose physical capabilities and adaptations enabled them to flourish in some of the Earth's most challenging environments. Their story serves as a reminder that there are numerous ways to be human and countless evolutionary paths that could have been taken. As we have seen, Neanderthals were truly exceptional in their physical attributes. Their bones were stronger, their musculature more powerful, and their bodies more resistant to cold and injury than ours could ever be. They were finely tuned survival machines, perfectly suited to the rigors of Ice Age Europe. Yet, their story is far from fully understood. As new discoveries are unearthed and novel analytical techniques are developed, our comprehension of these extraordinary humans continues to evolve. And as we will explore in the subsequent segment of our investigation, their physical prowess was matched by cognitive and technological abilities that compel us to fundamentally reevaluate who they were and how they lived. The evidence is undeniable. Neanderthals were not primitive brutes. They were sophisticated, robust humans whose biology and culture were ideally adapted to survive and thrive in the demanding landscapes of Ice Age Europe. Their exceptional physical might was merely one facet of a complex and successful adaptation that allowed them to dominate Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. In the forthcoming part of our exploration, we will delve deeper into the Neanderthal intellect, examining their cognitive capacities, their technological advancements, and the evidence pointing to complex social and cultural behaviors that paint a picture vastly different from the stereotypical grunting cave dwellers of popular imagination. And we will discover that in many respects, they were not so dissimilar from us after all. We have established that Neanderthals were physical powerhouses, stronger, more robust, and perfectly equipped to survive in frigid conditions that would prove fatal to most modern humans within days. However, their exceptional nature extends far beyond mere brute strength. Their brains and cognitive abilities challenge our preconceived notions about these ancient hominins. For decades, the prevailing scientific narrative depicted Neanderthals as intellectually inferior to modern humans, bigger and stronger, yes, but lacking the mental sophistication that supposedly enabled Homo sapiens to outcompete them. This convenient narrative positioned our ancestors as the rightful inheritors of the planet, destined to replace their more rudimentary cousins through superior intelligence. But recent findings have completely dismantled this self-serving myth. Neanderthals were not simply muscular brutes. They were sophisticated beings with large brains, intricate technologies, and social structures that allowed them to thrive for hundreds of thousands of years in environments we would struggle to survive in, even with all our modern technology. Let us begin with the most surprising revelation. Neanderthals possessed larger brains than we do. The average Neanderthal cranial capacity was approximately 1,600 cubic centimeters, compared to about 1,400 cubic centimeters for modern humans. Some Neanderthal specimens had brains as large as 1,700 cubic centimeters, well beyond the range of even the largest modern human brains. Size alone is not the sole determinant of brain function, of course. The internal organization is of paramount importance. And this is where the details become truly captivating. Detailed examinations of Neanderthal endocasts, which are models of the interior of their skulls, reveal that their brains were organized differently from ours, but not in the manner one might anticipate. Neanderthals had proportionally larger visual cortices, the regions of the brain responsible for processing visual information. This enhanced capacity for visual processing would have been immensely advantageous for hunters operating within the diverse terrains of Ice Age Europe. enabling them to detect prey at greater distances and in dimmer light conditions than modern humans could manage. They also allocated more neural resources to body control and somatosensory processing, the areas of the brain governing movement and physical sensation. This is entirely logical, given their highly physical lifestyle and hunting techniques, which demanded precise control of powerful movements. What is fascinating is that when researchers account for these variations in brain organization, they find that the remaining higher cognitive areas of the Neanderthal brain were comparable in size to those of modern humans. Their frontal lobes, the parts of the brain associated with planning, decision-making, and social cognition, were well developed, suggesting cognitive abilities akin to our own. However, the most compelling evidence for Neanderthal cognitive sophistication stems not from their cranial anatomy, but from their actual actions, as evidenced in the archaeological record of their behaviors and technologies. And this evidence is compelling scientists to completely revise their understanding of these ancient humans. Let us consider their technological accomplishments. For over 150 years, the Mousterian stone tool industry, the distinctive tradition of toolmaking associated with Neanderthals, was considered relatively simple and static when compared to the rapidly evolving technologies of early modern humans. However, closer inspection reveals a level of sophistication that commands respect. Neanderthals were adept practitioners of the Levallois technique, a method of stone tool production requiring meticulous planning and precise execution. This technique involves preparing a stone core in a specific manner to control the shape and size of the resultant flakes, thereby creating tools with predetermined forms, perfectly suited for particular tasks. This is not merely the act of striking stones together. It necessitates abstract thought, the capacity to visualize the finished tool within the raw stone, and the fine motor control to implement the requisite strikes. Modern experimental archaeologists attempting to replicate these tools often require years of dedicated practice to achieve the level of skill evident even in average Neanderthal implements. Furthermore, their technological prowess extended far beyond knapping stone. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that Neanderthals fashioned and utilized sophisticated adhesives to affix stone points to wooden shafts, thereby creating more effective composite tools. The most common adhesive was birch bark tar, a substance that requires an intricate multi-stage production process. To produce birch bark tar, Neanderthals had to carefully heat birch bark in an oxygen-depleted environment at controlled temperatures. If the temperature was too low, the tar would not form. If it was too high, it would simply combust. This process demands not only control over fire, but also an understanding of pyrotechnology that was once believed to be exclusive to modern humans. The complexity of this procedure is such that contemporary archaeologists have encountered difficulties in recreating it using only technologies available to Neanderthals. The fact that Neanderthals routinely manufactured these adhesives across Europe for tens of thousands of years speaks volumes about their cognitive capabilities and technological expertise. Their mastery of fire extended beyond mere adhesive production. Evidence from Neanderthal sites indicates they strategically placed hearths within their living areas, regulated fire temperatures for various purposes, and likely employed fire not only for warmth, but also for cooking, hardening wooden implements, and possibly even for ritualistic practices. At the Abric Romani site in Spain, archaeologists discovered evidence of multiple hearths, arranged in what appears to be a deliberate layout within a living space, suggesting that Neanderthals organized their domestic environments in complex ways. The hearths were positioned to delineate distinct activity zones, some for toolmaking, others for food preparation, and still others, perhaps, for sleeping. Their toolkit was not confined to stone and wood either. At several locations, archaeologists have found evidence of bone tools, implements crafted from animal bones that were shaped and polished for specific uses. At Abri de la Pile and Pêche de l'Asie in France, researchers uncovered Neanderthal bone tools known as lissoirs, specialized instruments used for working animal hides, rendering them more supple and water-resistant. What is remarkable about these tools is that they represent the earliest documented instance of a technology that would later become commonplace among modern humans. This is not a case of Neanderthals imitating modern human technology. These bone tools predate the arrival of modern humans in the region by thousands of years, a clear instance of independent innovation. This provides further testament to Neanderthal cognitive sophistication and technological ingenuity. Even more astonishing was the discovery in the year 2020 of direct evidence of fiber technology employed by Neanderthals. At the site of Abri du Maras in France, researchers found a 3-ply cord fragment made from inner bark fibers, dating back to between 41 and 42,000 years ago. 52,000 years ago, the oldest direct evidence of string or cord production ever unearthed. The significance of this discovery cannot be overstated. The creation of twisted fiber cordage necessitates an understanding of multiple concepts: how materials can be processed to extract usable fibers, how those fibers can be twisted to create stronger strands, and how those strands can be combined to form even stronger cord. It implies a mathematical comprehension of patterns and processes that was once believed to be uniquely human. And cordage is not merely significant as a technology in itself. It serves as the foundation for numerous other technologies: ropes, nets, bags, clothing, components of shelters. All rely on the ability to create and utilize cordage. The presence of this technology suggests that Neanderthals may have possessed access to a whole array of complex tools and equipment that have simply not survived in the archaeological record. We have long acknowledged that Neanderthals were expert hunters, but recent research has illuminated the profound sophistication of their hunting strategies. Far from being simple, opportunistic predators, Neanderthals employed complex, planned hunting tactics that demanded an intimate knowledge of animal behavior and landscape features. At sites across Europe, evidence indicates that Neanderthals strategically positioned themselves to intercept migrating herds at natural bottlenecks in the terrain, locations where the landscape would concentrate animals, rendering them more vulnerable. They appear to have coordinated group hunts, with different individuals assuming distinct roles in the pursuit and subduing of formidable prey. Some sites suggest they utilize drive hunting techniques, where groups of hunters collaborated to channel animals toward ambush points or natural traps such as ravines or marshy areas. This type of coordinated hunting requires not only physical prowess, but also communication, planning, and shared knowledge of both the terrain and the behavior of prey species. The sophistication of their hunting is reflected in their prey selection. Studies of animal remains from Neanderthal sites demonstrate that they did not simply take whatever animals they happened to encounter. They selectively targeted prime-aged adult animals, those in their physical prime that would offer the greatest nutritional benefit, despite being the most perilous to hunt. This kind of selective hunting is not characteristic of simple-minded brutes. It indicates complex decision-making that weighs risks against potential rewards and requires extensive knowledge transmitted across generations. It is the behavior of sophisticated hunter-gatherers with rich cultural traditions and a deep ecological understanding. Their ecological knowledge extended beyond mere hunting. Analysis of plant remains and residues from Neanderthal sites reveals that they utilized a wide spectrum of plant resources for sustenance, medicinal purposes, and materials. They were not exclusively meat eaters. They were knowledgeable foragers who understood which plants were edible, which possessed medicinal properties, and which could be employed for technological applications. At the Shanidar cave site in Iraq, scientists discovered pollen concentrations surrounding a Neanderthal burial that suggest flowers may have been placed with the deceased. While the interpretation of a flower burial remains a subject of debate, the presence of these plants remains unequivocally demonstrates that Neanderthals engaged with plants in complex ways beyond basic subsistence. More compelling is the evidence derived from dental calculus. The hardened plaque found on Neanderthal teeth. Analysis of this material has revealed traces of numerous plant species, including some with medicinal properties. A particularly striking example comes from El Sidrón Cave in Spain, where researchers found evidence suggesting that a Neanderthal suffering from a dental abscess had been consuming plants with antibiotic properties, indicating they possessed knowledge not only of edible plants, but also of those that could be used to treat specific ailments. This type of sophisticated ethnobotanical knowledge, the understanding of which plants can be used for what purposes, necessitates not only individual learning, but also cultural transmission across generations. It stands as yet another line of evidence pointing to complex Neanderthal societies with accumulated knowledge and traditions. Perhaps the most surprising and debated aspect of Neanderthal behavior is their apparent capacity for symbolic expression, including art, ornaments, and potentially ritualistic practices that were once considered exclusively human traits. For decades, the scientific consensus held that symbolic behavior emerged abruptly with modern humans, representing a cognitive leap that differentiated us from all other hominins. However, evidence from Neanderthal sites is challenging this narrative. At multiple locations across Europe, archaeologists have discovered evidence that Neanderthals collected and processed colored pigments, such as red and yellow ochre. These materials had no discernible practical use, but may have been employed for body adornment, coloring animal hides, or creating visual symbols. At Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, researchers found perforated seashells stained with pigments that appear to have been worn as ornaments, dating back over 115,000 years ago, long before modern humans arrived in the region. Similar findings from other sites suggest this was not an isolated occurrence, but a widespread Neanderthal practice. Even more astonishing is the evidence for Neanderthal cave art at La Pasiega Cave in Spain, a ladder-like symbol painted in red ochre, has been dated to more than 64,000 years ago, at least 20,000 years prior to the arrival of modern humans in Europe. Similar dates have been obtained for hand stencils at Maltravieso Cave and a red geometric symbol at Ardali's Cave, both located in Spain. If these dates prove accurate, and they remain a subject of controversy among some researchers, they provide clear evidence that Neanderthals were creating symbolic representations long before they encountered modern humans. This would represent a profound refutation of the notion that symbolic thought was unique to Homo sapiens. Less controversial but equally significant is the evidence for Neanderthal constructions deep within cave systems. At Bruniquel Cave in France, archaeologists discovered a circular structure fashioned from deliberately broken stalagmites, situated more than 300 meters from the cave entrance in complete darkness. This structure has been dated to 176,000 years ago, a time when only Neanderthals inhabited Europe. The implications are profound. The construction of this edifice would have required not only planning and cooperation, but also artificial illumination. Neanderthals would have had to maintain and control fire as they ventured into the depths of the cave. The purpose of the structure remains enigmatic. It shows no indication of habitation or practical use, suggesting it may have possessed ritualistic or symbolic significance. These are not the actions of simple, instinct-driven brutes. They are the behaviors of beings with complex inner lives, beings capable of abstract thought, symbolic representation, and potentially spiritual or ritualistic practices. Perhaps the most humanizing aspect of Neanderthal behavior is their apparent compassion for one another. Numerous Neanderthal skeletons have been unearthed, bearing evidence of severe injuries and disabilities that had healed before death. These were individuals who could only have survived with the support and care of their community. The renowned Old Man of La Chapelle serves as a classic illustration. This elderly Neanderthal suffered from severe arthritis, a damaged hip, missing teeth, and other pathologies that would have made it challenging for him to contribute to hunting or other physically demanding tasks. Nevertheless, he survived to an age considered advanced by Paleolithic standards, suggesting his community continued to care for him despite his diminished productivity. Similar cases have been found at other sites, involving individuals with serious injuries or congenital deformities who lived for years after becoming incapacitated. This is not the behavior of creatures solely concerned with immediate survival. It is evidence of social bonds, empathy, and a recognition of the inherent value of individuals beyond their immediate utility. Quintessentially human traits. And then there are the burials. At multiple sites across Europe and the Middle East, archaeologists have discovered Neanderthal remains in positions and contexts that strongly indicate intentional burial. The bodies were placed in natural or artificially created depressions, sometimes in a flexed posture, and on occasion accompanied by what appear to be grave goods, objects placed with the deceased. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, several Neanderthal burials have been uncovered, including the aforementioned famous flower burial. While the interpretation of flowers being deliberately placed with the body remains a subject of debate, the act of deliberate burial itself is not in question. More recent excavations at La Côte de Saint-Brelade in France have bolstered the case for Neanderthal burials. A thorough reevaluation of the locale has uncovered undeniable proof of a deliberately excavated pit into which the deceased had been placed, starkly contrasting with the notion of a mere natural hollow, a theory espoused by certain doubters. The intentional internment of human remains signifies more than just practical considerations for sanitation or protection from scavengers. It points to abstract contemplation regarding mortality, perhaps reflecting beliefs about an existence beyond life, and undoubtedly deep emotional bonds with departed members of their society. This stands as one of the most potent demonstrations that Neanderthals possessed a cognitive and emotional landscape akin to our own. Collectively, all of this evidence, from their tool-making to their artistic expressions, their understanding of the natural world to their compassion for the infirm, paints a portrait of Neanderthals as advanced beings with vibrant cultural heritages and intricate social structures. They were not merely rudimentary predecessors to ourselves. Rather, they represented a distinct manifestation of humanity, adeptly adapted to different conditions, yet no less intellectually gifted or capable. If they were so competent, then why did they vanish while our own lineage flourished? The explanation is multifaceted and still a subject of ongoing scholarly debate, but it likely stems from a confluence of elements rather than any singular decisive edge held by Homo sapiens. Environmental shifts undeniably played a part. The period experienced a succession of abrupt and severe climatic transformations, characterized by sudden incursions of cold, followed by brief respites of warmth. These drastic environmental fluctuations would have placed immense strain on the ecosystems upon which Neanderthals depended, potentially diminishing game populations and complicating their reliance on a diet rich in high-calorie meat. Modern humans, equipped with a slightly different arsenal of technologies and potentially more adaptable subsistence methods, may have been better positioned to navigate these environmental challenges. Research indicates that early Homo sapiens exploited a wider array of sustenance sources, including smaller game and marine life, which are less commonly found in Neanderthal sites. However, the explanation extends beyond mere technological or subsistence advantages. Demographic factors likely contributed significantly. Genetic analyses of Neanderthal remains suggest they lived in relatively small, isolated communities with limited genetic variation. This vulnerability could have led to inbreeding depression, a reduction in biological fitness due to the accumulation of deleterious genetic mutations. In contrast, modern human populations appear to have maintained larger, more interconnected social networks with greater gene flow between groups. This demographic configuration would have conferred enhanced resilience against environmental adversities and potential competitive advantages in resource-rich territories. Pathogens may also have been a contributing factor. It is plausible that migrating Homo sapiens introduced novel diseases to which Neanderthals had no prior immunity. Such illnesses could have had devastating consequences for Neanderthal communities already weakened by climatic shifts and competition. While direct violent confrontation might not have been the primary mode of interaction, competition was likely substantial. As modern human populations expanded into Europe, they would have increasingly vied with Neanderthals for vital resources, choice hunting grounds, sheltered cave dwellings, and high-quality stone for crafting tools. Even in the absence of overt conflict, this competition could have gradually exerted pressure on Neanderthal populations. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Neanderthal disappearance is their incomplete extinction. Genetic research has revealed that a significant portion of individuals of Eurasian descent carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA in their genetic makeup. This suggests that rather than being entirely supplanted, Neanderthals may have been partially assimilated into the burgeoning modern human populace. As their numbers dwindled, due to the aforementioned factors, surviving Neanderthals may have increasingly integrated with modern human groups, their distinct genetic lineage gradually becoming diluted but never entirely obliterated. The genetic legacy of these interbreeding events endures with us today. Certain Neanderthal gene variants appear to have conferred an advantage upon modern humans migrating into the colder climes of Eurasia, including genes related to skin and hair pigmentation, fat metabolism, and immune responses to European pathogens. These beneficial variants were preserved through natural selection and remain part of our genetic heritage. Conversely, other Neanderthal variants proved detrimental and were progressively eliminated from the human gene pool, notably genes located on the X chromosome, suggesting that male hybrid offspring may have experienced diminished reproductive capacity, and genes influencing certain aspects of brain development. This selective retention and removal of Neanderthal DNA has shaped the human genome in intricate ways that are only beginning to be understood. Therefore, the narrative of the Neanderthals is not simply one of less capable beings being superseded by more advanced ones. It is a complex account of two distinct human species, both possessing considerable intelligence and both achieving remarkable technological and cultural feats, confronting the challenges of a rapidly transforming world with divergent biological and cultural adaptations. The Neanderthals were neither failed humans nor evolutionary dead ends. They were remarkably successful organisms that thrived in some of the planet's most formidable environments for hundreds of thousands of years, far surpassing the duration of our own species' existence. Their physical and cognitive adaptations enabled them to dominate Ice Age Europe in ways we can scarcely fathom. Moreover, elements of their biological makeup persist within many of us today. As our understanding of these extraordinary beings continues to grow, so too does our appreciation for their capabilities. The crude depictions of stooped, grunting brutes that once characterized popular perception have yielded to a far more nuanced and respectful comprehension of who Neanderthals truly were. They were not merely evolutionary anomalies in terms of their physical robustness. They were sophisticated, intelligent beings endowed with rich cultural traditions, advanced technologies, and social lives not dissimilar to our own. Their story is not a peripheral detail in the grand chronicle of human evolution. It is a parallel narrative of a different, yet equally valid form of human existence. And as we will explore in the subsequent segment of our exploration, the Neanderthals' exceptional adaptations extended far beyond their corporeal forms and intellects, encompassing intricate social frameworks and cultural innovations that enabled their prosperity in environments that would prove nearly insurmountable for us today. Their saga continues to unfold as emerging discoveries shed further light on these remarkable humans who coexisted with our ancestors across the Ice Age landscapes of ancient Europe. We have already examined the extraordinary physical prowess of Neanderthals, their immense strength, their bodies adapted to frigid conditions, and their specialized hunting skills. We have also scrutinized their remarkable brains and cognitive capacities, which were larger than ours, organized differently, yet clearly capable of sophisticated thought and groundbreaking innovation. Now, let us delve even more deeply into what truly distinguished Neanderthals as such exceptional beings: their social structures, their strategies for survival, and the astonishing technologies they devised to flourish. Picture yourself transported back 40,000 years to the heart of the last ice age in Europe. You stand upon a windswept plain in what will eventually become southern France. The temperature hovers around minus 20 degrees Celsius. The wind feels as though it cuts like a blade. The landscape stretches out as a treeless steppe to the horizon, broken only by the occasional rocky prominence. There are no structures, no thoroughfares, no electrical conduits. Nothing of the contemporary world exists. It is merely you, the cold and the unyielding wilderness. Without modern technology, without waterproof outerwear, insulated footwear, navigational devices, and emergency support systems, how long could you possibly endure? Hours, perhaps a day or two at most? This was the existence of Neanderthals, not for a brief weekend excursion or a test of survival skills, but for their entire lives, generation after generation, for hundreds of thousands of years. And they did not merely endure these conditions, they thrived. They hunted, they raised families, they created art and developed technologies. They lived full, complex lives in environments that would prove fatal to most modern humans within mere days. How did they achieve this? The answer lies not solely in their physical adaptations, although these were undeniably critical, but also in their social organization, their accumulated wisdom, and the sophisticated technologies they engineered. These technologies are only now beginning to receive the recognition they truly merit. Let us commence with their living arrangements. The prevailing image of Neanderthals as mere cave dwellers is not entirely inaccurate. They did indeed frequently utilize caves and rocky overhangs as bases, particularly in colder regions and during the winter months. But archaeological findings reveal a far greater sophistication in their use of these spaces than was previously understood. At numerous sites, evidence has been found of organized living quarters within caves, areas designated for distinct activities, with hearths strategically positioned to provide warmth, facilitate cooking, and offer illumination. At the site of a Reno in Spain, researchers unearthed the remnants of wooden platforms that appear to have served as sleeping surfaces, elevated above the cold, damp cave floor. These were not simply haphazard nests, but deliberately constructed features within a well-ordered living environment. However, Neanderthals were not confined to caves. At open-air locations such as Moldova in Ukraine, archaeologists have discovered evidence of constructed shelters. These structures, built using mammoth bones as foundations and supports, were likely covered with hides to create protected living spaces. Even in areas devoid of natural caves, these structures were not temporary overnight refuges. They exhibit signs of repeated use and upkeep over extended periods. What is particularly noteworthy about these living spaces is the evidence they provide for long-term planning and resource management. Neanderthals were not merely reacting to immediate necessities. They were anticipating future requirements and making preparations accordingly. They amassed stockpiles of materials for fires, gathered tools and provisions, and established areas capable of supporting prolonged occupation during the harshest seasons. This foresight extends to their methods of acquiring sustenance as well. Far from being opportunistic scavengers or simplistic hunters who simply took whatever prey they chanced upon, Neanderthals employed intricate strategies that demanded an intimate knowledge of landscape features. Neanderthal sites reveal patterns indicative of highly organized hunting practices. At many locations, the skeletal remains show a concentration on specific prey species during particular times of the year. Reindeer during their autumnal migrations, ibex during the summer months when they descended to lower altitudes, and bison when they congregated in valleys during winter. This selective hunting required not only tracking abilities, but also an understanding of animal migratory routes and seasonal behaviors. The evidence also indicates that they transported specific animal parts back to their living sites, the most nutritionally valuable portions that yielded the greatest return for the energy expended in carrying them. This type of selective transport is neither random nor instinctual. It reflects deliberate calculations regarding resource efficiency, further underscoring their sophisticated planning and knowledge. Perhaps most impressive is the evidence for communal hunting techniques. At sites such as the Channel Island of Jersey, specifically at the Les Coterets site, archaeologists have discovered the remains of dozens of mammoths and rhinoceroses at the base of a cliff. The arrangement of these remains suggests that Neanderthals deliberately drove herds towards the cliff edge, causing them to fall to their deaths, a hunting tactic that would have necessitated coordination among multiple individuals fulfilling distinct roles. Similar evidence of cooperative hunting has been unearthed at sites across Europe. These were not solitary hunters, but organized groups working in concert to bring down prey that no single individual could manage alone. This level of cooperation demanded communication, planning, and social cohesion, all characteristic of complex societal structures. And these social structures extended beyond mere hunting expeditions. Multiple lines of evidence suggest that Neanderthals lived in small, tightly knit communities, characterized by strong social bonds and mutual support systems. The instances of care for injured individuals, as previously discussed, those who survived severe injuries that would have rendered them incapable of participating in hunting or other strenuous activities, demonstrate social commitments that transcended immediate utility. The size of these communities has been estimated based on the dimensions of living spaces and the availability of resources in different environmental contexts. In most regions, Neanderthals appear to have resided in bands of approximately 10 to 20 individuals, essentially extended family units that remained together throughout the year, sharing resources and knowledge. These bands, however, were not entirely isolated. The distribution of distinctive stone tools and raw materials points to networks of interaction between different Neanderthal groups across considerable distances. High-quality stone was occasionally transported or traded over distances of 50 kilometers or more, indicating contact and exchange between distinct bands. Within these groups, there is evidence of task specialization and defined roles. Patterns of wear and injury on Neanderthal skeletons suggest that certain individuals consistently performed specific tasks. Some may have focused more intensely on hunting, while others perhaps concentrated on processing hides or crafting tools. This kind of specialization allows groups to achieve more than they could if all members were generalists, and it serves as another indicator of social complexity. There is even compelling evidence for distinct cultural traditions among different Neanderthal groups, manifesting as regional variations in tool-making techniques, strategies for resource exploitation, and possibly symbolic practices. These were not merely instinctive behaviors shared by all members of the species, but learned traditions passed down through generations within specific communities. This cultural transmission, the conveyance of knowledge from one generation to the next, is perhaps one of the most distinctly human aspects of Neanderthal existence. The sophistication of their technologies and hunting strategies could not have been independently reinvented by each individual or even each generation. They represent accumulated knowledge built up over millennia and preserved through instruction and learning within social units. Consider their technological accomplishments. The intricacy of Neanderthal stone tools has long been recognized, but recent investigations have revealed their capacity for far more than merely chipping flint. They created composite tools, implements that combine different materials, such as stone, wood, and adhesives, to fashion more effective weapons and implements than could be produced from any single substance. The fabrication of birch bark tar adhesive mentioned previously is particularly noteworthy. Producing this substance requires a complex multi-stage process involving the careful application of heat in an oxygen-depleted environment. The tar must then be processed and applied while still warm, as it becomes brittle and unusable once cooled. This technology demands not only an understanding of materials, but also precise control over temperature and timing. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to replicate this process using only technologies available to Neanderthals with limited success. The fact that Neanderthals routinely produced this sophisticated adhesive speaks volumes about their technological prowess and the depth of their cultural knowledge. They were not simply fashioning tools, they were engaging in intricate manufacturing processes that required planning, precision, and specialized expertise. This behavior is not indicative of simple brutes acting on instinct, but rather the work of intelligent beings with rich cultural traditions and accumulated technical mastery. Their technological achievements also extended to fibers and cordage. The discovery of a 3-ply cord fragment at the Abri du Maras in France, mentioned earlier, indicates that they understood how to process plant materials to extract usable fibers, how to twist those fibers to create stronger strands, and how to combine those strands to produce even more resilient cord. While this might appear to be a simple technology from a modern perspective, it represents a fundamental innovation that underlies countless other technologies. Cordage is the basis for nets, bags, snares, fishing lines, and components of complex tools like bows. It is a transformative technology that dramatically expands human capabilities. And Neanderthals mastered it tens of thousands of years ago. The evidence for fiber technology raises intriguing questions about what other perishable technologies Neanderthals might have developed. Did they create basketry, woven mats, or nets for fishing or trapping small game? The cordage fragment suggests these possibilities, although direct evidence is scarce due to the poor preservation of organic materials in most archaeological contexts. We do know that they processed animal hides to create what were likely components of clothing and shelter. At numerous Neanderthal sites, archaeologists have unearthed specialized tools used for scraping and softening hides, indicating not just the use of animal skins for practical purposes, but a sophisticated understanding of how to transform raw hides into more useful materials. The bone tools discovered at Abri-Péronne and Les Pradelles in France, specifically the lissoir, or smoothers used for working hides, represent another level of technological refinement. These were not merely stones picked up and used opportunistically, but carefully crafted implements designed for specific tasks. Their creation required the selection of appropriate bones, their shaping to the desired form, and their polishing to produce the smooth working surface necessary for effective hide processing. This type of specialized tool creation suggests not only technical knowledge, but also specialized roles within Neanderthal societies, individuals who developed particular skills and perhaps focused on specific tasks. It is another indicator of social complexity and division of labor within their communities. Fire technology was another domain where Neanderthals exhibited remarkable sophistication. They were not simply utilizing fires ignited by natural phenomena like lightning strikes. They were creating and controlling fire for multiple purposes. Hearths discovered at Neanderthal sites show evidence of repeated use and maintenance, with different areas seemingly designated for various fire-related activities. They appear to have used fire not only for warmth and cooking, but also for hardening wooden tools, processing birch bark tar, and potentially for ritual or social functions. The structures found deep within Bruniquel Cave could only have been constructed with artificial light, indicating that Neanderthals were capable of transporting and maintaining fire even in challenging environments. The mastery of fire represents a transformative technology that dramatically expands human potential. It extends the habitable day by providing illumination after sunset, enables habitation of colder regions through the provision of warmth, makes a broader range of foods digestible through cooking, and serves as a tool for transforming materials such as wood and adhesives. Neanderthals were not simply using fire, they were exploiting its full potential as a multi-purpose technology. Their technological achievements were not confined to material culture. They also developed sophisticated hunting and tracking techniques that enabled them to effectively exploit the challenging environments of Ice Age Europe. The evidence suggests they understood animal migratory patterns, recognized seasonal shifts in prey behavior, and intercepted prey at vulnerable points in the landscape. They appear to have employed ambush hunting techniques, drive hunting strategies, and possibly trapping methods, each demanding distinct skills and knowledge. This was not instinctive behavior, but learned expertise, accumulated and refined over generations, and passed down through instruction and observation. The diverse array of hunting strategies employed by Neanderthals suggests they adapted their approaches to specific game animals and prevailing environmental circumstances rather than applying a uniform method. Such context-dependent adaptation necessitates not only acquired knowledge, but also the capacity for situational analysis and the application of suitable techniques, which clearly indicates advanced cognitive abilities. Their expertise extended beyond the pursuit of game to a broader comprehension of the natural world. Examination of plant remnants discovered at Neanderthal sites reveals their utilization of a wide spectrum of botanical resources for sustenance, medicinal purposes, and material needs. They were not solely consumers of meat, but adept gatherers with a thorough understanding of which flora were edible, which possessed healing properties, and which could serve practical technological functions. Evidence from El Sidron cave in Spain, where dental calculus from a Neanderthal individual yielded traces of plants exhibiting antibiotic qualities, implies they recognized not only the edibility of plants, but also their therapeutic applications for specific ailments. This depth of medicinal understanding represents another sophisticated cultural tradition that would have been cultivated over generations and transmitted through social learning. Collectively, these technological and knowledge systems, encompassing tool manufacture, fire management, hunting methodologies, and medicinal practices, represent cultural adaptations that enabled Neanderthals to flourish in environments that would rapidly prove fatal to most modern humans without technological aid. Their survival was not merely a result of physiological adaptations, but of the cumulative wisdom accumulated across countless generations, preserved and disseminated through social interaction. This leads us to what is perhaps the most captivating dimension of Neanderthal existence: their apparent aptitude for symbolic thought and expression. For an extended period, the prevailing scientific consensus maintained that symbolic behaviors, encompassing art, rituals, adornments, and other non-utilitarian manifestations, emerged abruptly with modern humans, signifying a cognitive leap that distinguished us from all other hominins. However, this narrative is increasingly being challenged. The discovery of perforated and pigment-stained marine shells from the Cova de Larago in Spain, dating back over 115,000 years, suggests that Neanderthals were crafting and wearing personal ornaments long before the arrival of modern humans in Europe. These were not items of practical utility, but rather objects of personal adornment, likely imbued with symbolic significance within Neanderthal societal frameworks. The presence of red ochre paintings in Spanish caverns, the abstract symbol at La Pasiega, the hand stencils at Maltravieso, and the geometric patterns at Ardales, all dated to more than 64,000 years ago, indicate that Neanderthals were creating visual symbols millennia prior to the arrival of modern humans in these regions. If these chronological estimations are accurate, they provide compelling evidence that symbolic expression was not exclusive to Homo sapiens, but was within the cognitive purview of Neanderthals as well. The circular structure discovered deep within Brunikel Cave, constructed 176,000 years ago, represents perhaps the most enigmatic testament to symbolic behavior. This arrangement of broken stalagmites, situated far from the cave entrance in absolute darkness, exhibits no indication of practical application. It appears to have been fashioned for purposes that transcended immediate utility, possibly ceremonial, perhaps social, but undeniably symbolic in nature. These are not isolated findings, but are part of a burgeoning body of evidence suggesting that Neanderthals possessed what could be termed a symbolic consciousness, the capacity to imbue objects and actions with meaning beyond their immediate functional value. This faculty underpins not only art and personal adornment, but also, potentially, language, ritual, and other complex social behaviors that we consider quintessentially human. The question of whether Neanderthals possessed language remains one of the most intriguing and formidable challenges in the study of these ancient hominins. Direct evidence is exceedingly scarce as language leaves no fossil record. However, multiple lines of indirect evidence strongly suggest they likely had sophisticated communication systems. The reconstructed anatomy of the Neanderthal vocal tract, based on fossil remains, indicates they were physically capable of producing a range of sounds comparable to modern human speech. The hyoid bone, a small bone in the throat that supports the tongue and is crucial for vocalization, found in a Neanderthal from Kibera Cave in Israel, is virtually identical to that of modern humans. Genetic evidence also provides compelling indications. Neanderthals possess the FOXP2 gene, often referred to as the language gene, because mutations in this gene result in severe speech and language impairments in modern humans. The Neanderthal variant of this gene was remarkably similar to our own, suggesting a potential for comparable language capabilities. However, perhaps the most persuasive evidence stems from the intricacy of their social behaviors and technologies. The level of coordination required for cooperative hunting, the instructional efforts necessary to impart complex technological knowledge, such as the production of birch bark tar, and the apparent division of labor within social units, all point towards the necessity of sophisticated communication systems. Language is not solely a matter of the physical capacity to produce sounds. It encompasses the cognitive ability to employ symbols to represent concepts and to assemble these symbols according to established rules. The evidence for symbolic thought in other domains, art, adornments, and potentially ritualistic activities, suggests that Neanderthals possessed the fundamental cognitive architecture for language use. If they did possess language, its form is speculative. However, considering their environment and lifestyle, Neanderthal discourse might have been rich in terminology pertaining to hunting, animal behavior, meteorological patterns, and geographical features. It may have included sophisticated methods for conveying information about past events and future plans, essential for coordinating hunting expeditions and seasonal migrations. It likely encompassed social language, facilitating the expression of relationships, emotions, and group identity. This brings us to another compelling aspect of Neanderthal life: their emotional and spiritual dimensions. The evidence of deliberate burial of the deceased, discussed previously, suggests they held concepts regarding mortality and possibly beliefs about an existence beyond death. Their care for injured individuals indicates strong social bonds and empathy. The potential existence of ritualistic structures, such as the one at Brunikel Cave, implies they may have held spiritual or religious convictions. These are not the behaviors of rudimentary beings solely preoccupied with immediate survival needs. They suggest that Neanderthals possessed rich inner lives, capable of contemplating abstract concepts, forming profound emotional connections, and perhaps pondering existential questions and the nature of meaning in ways not dissimilar to our own. Recent genetic research has offered intriguing insights into Neanderthal psychology. Studies of Neanderthal DNA suggest they may have exhibited a greater predisposition toward depression and mood disorders compared to modern humans, potentially an evolutionary adaptation to the prolonged dark winters of Northern Europe, where conserving energy through reduced activity during the most severe season might have conferred a survival advantage. Other genetic evidence points to potential variations in social behavior. Neanderthals appear to have lived in smaller, more tightly knit social units than early modern humans. This social structure may have been an adaptation to their environments, characterized by scarce and widely dispersed resources, rendering large-scale communal living impractical. These smaller, more intimate social groups might have fostered intense interpersonal bonds, but potentially constrained the scope of collective action and information exchange compared to the broader networks maintained by early modern humans. This divergence in social organization, rather than any deficiency in individual cognitive capacity, may help elucidate certain differences in cultural development between the two species. The overall picture emerging from this accumulated evidence portrays Neanderthals as sophisticated beings with complex social lives, rich cultural traditions, and cognitive faculties not fundamentally dissimilar to our own. They were not inferior versions of ourselves, but a distinct manifestation of humanity, adapted to varied environments and circumstances, yet no less intelligent or capable. Their physical adaptations, powerful physiques, cold adapted physiology, and enhanced visual systems were complemented by equally remarkable cultural adaptations. They developed technologies perfectly suited to their requirements, amassed ecological knowledge that enabled efficient resource exploitation, and established social structures that supported their way of life in some of the planet's most challenging terrains. For hundreds of thousands of years, a duration far exceeding the existence of our own species, they thrived across Europe and parts of Asia, weathering multiple glacial cycles, surviving dramatic climatic shifts, and cultivating cultural traditions that were passed down through countless generations. Their success was neither accidental nor ephemeral. It was the product of sophisticated biological and cultural adaptations. So why did they vanish while our ancestors prospered? As previously noted, the explanation likely involves multiple factors: climatic change, competition with expanding modern human populations, potential exposure to diseases, and demographic challenges stemming from their smaller, isolated population structure. However, their disappearance does not diminish their accomplishments or their significance in the grand narrative of human evolution. Neanderthals were not evolutionary failures or dead ends. They were exceptionally successful beings who dominated Ice Age Europe for hundreds of millennia, and their genetic legacy endures within many of us today. Perhaps the most profound lesson derived from our evolving understanding of Neanderthals is that there are myriad ways to be human, numerous paths that human evolution could have pursued. Neanderthals represent an alternative expression of humanity, distinct from us in significant ways, yet equally valid, equally sophisticated, and equally deserving of our respect and admiration. They were not merely anomalies of nature due to their physical prowess. They were extraordinary beings in every respect. Physically, cognitively, technologically, and culturally, their story is not a peripheral note in human evolution, but a parallel narrative of a different, yet equally valid mode of human existence. And as we will explore in the subsequent part of our journey, the relationship between Neanderthals and our direct ancestors, the early modern humans who migrated out of Africa approximately 60,000 years ago, is far more intricate and intriguing than the simplistic tale of replacement that dominated scientific thought for decades. The evidence suggests not merely competition, but interaction, interbreeding, and potentially cultural exchange, a fascinating chapter in the human story that continues to unfold with each new discovery. What is unequivocally clear is that Neanderthals were not solely robust. They were also sophisticated. They were not merely survivors. They were innovators. And they were not flawed humans. They were successful, intelligent beings who thrived in environments that would challenge most modern humans today. Their narrative warrants recognition not as a footnote in human evolution, but as a remarkable chapter in its own right, recounting the story of another form of human who inhabited the earth alongside our ancestors, and whose legacy persists in our genetic makeup and in our growing appreciation for the diverse tapestry of human experience. We have delved deeply into the world of Neanderthals, examining their remarkable physical capabilities, their sophisticated intellects, and the intricate cultural adaptations that enabled their flourishing in the formidable environments of Ice Age Europe. However, their narrative gains even greater fascination when we consider their interactions with our direct ancestors, the anatomically modern humans who commenced their migrations out of Africa approximately 70,000 years ago and eventually reached Europe around 45,000 years ago. The conventional depiction of this encounter was straightforward and dramatic. Superior modern humans, equipped with more advanced technology and greater intelligence, swiftly supplanted the rudimentary Neanderthals through resource competition or even direct conflict. This compelling narrative positioned our ancestors as the inevitable victors in an evolutionary struggle. Yet, like so many simplistic accounts of complex historical processes, it was fundamentally inaccurate. The authentic narrative, illuminated by decades of archaeological research and recently revolutionized by genetic discoveries, is considerably more nuanced and captivating. It is not a tale of superior beings displacing inferior ones, but of two highly adapted human species, each possessing unique strengths and specialized adaptations, encountering each other after hundreds of thousands of years of divergent evolution. To comprehend this encounter, we must first understand the nature of these early modern humans, our direct ancestors who had evolved in Africa while Neanderthals were adapting to the austere conditions of Ice Age Europe. Anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, emerged in Africa approximately 300,000 years ago, while Neanderthals were developing stockier, more robust bodies suited to frigid environments. Our ancestors were evolving amidst the varied landscapes of Africa. From savannas to forests, from highlands to coastal regions, this diverse ecological backdrop may offer insight into some of the differences between the two species. Modern humans developed more gracile physiques, characterized by greater height, lighter build, longer limbs, and less muscle mass compared to Neanderthals. These proportions were more conducive to heat dissipation in warmer climates and may have afforded greater endurance at the expense of raw power. Where Neanderthals were adept sprinters for close-range hunting, modern humans were endurance runners, capable of persistent hunting that involved tracking prey over extended distances until the animal succumbed to exhaustion. Their technology reflected these distinctions. While Neanderthals excelled at crafting robust thrusting spears for close quarters combat, early modern humans developed projectile weapons, including lightweight spears designed for distant throws and, subsequently, atlatls, which further extended their throwing range. These technologies minimized the risk of injury from dangerous game and were consistent with the more gracile, endurance-oriented physique of modern humans. By approximately 70,000 years ago, groups of modern humans began to venture beyond Africa, initially migrating into the Middle East, and then gradually spreading across Asia, reaching Australia by around 65,000 years ago. Their expansion was not a singular, coordinated exodus, but rather a series of movements by distinct groups spanning thousands of years. Upon their arrival in Europe around 45,000 years ago, they encountered landscapes and conditions vastly different from their African homeland. Europe was experiencing the throes of the last ice age, with environments ranging from cold steppes in the north to Mediterranean woodlands in the south. And inhabiting these challenging terrains were the Neanderthals, humans whose physical and cultural attributes had been adapting to these conditions for millennia. What transpired when these two human species encountered each other? For decades, the archaeological record seemed to present a straightforward narrative. Modern humans appeared in Europe, and within a few thousand years, Neanderthals vanished. This apparent correlation led many researchers to conclude that modern humans had simply outcompeted Neanderthals, possibly due to superior technology, enhanced intelligence, or more efficient subsistence strategies. However, recent discoveries have unveiled a far more intricate scenario. The initial revelation arrived in 2010, when genetic researchers announced they had successfully sequenced the Neanderthal genome, making a remarkable discovery. The majority of individuals of Eurasian descent carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA within their genetic makeup. This provided irrefutable evidence that our ancestors did not merely compete with Neanderthals, but engaged in interbreeding with them. Subsequent genetic investigations have refined our understanding of this interbreeding. It appears to have occurred on multiple occasions between 45 and 55,000 years ago, predominantly in the Middle East, but possibly also in Europe. The distribution pattern of Neanderthal DNA in modern human genomes suggests that these interbreeding events were not isolated occurrences but transpired with sufficient frequency to leave a lasting genetic imprint. This discovery fundamentally transformed our perception of the relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals. It was not a simple case of one species replacing another, but rather a complex interplay involving both competition and assimilation. In a very real sense, Neanderthals did not simply become extinct. Aspects of them persist within many of us today. The genetic evidence also illuminated the nature of this interbreeding. Certain Neanderthal genetic lineages were retained within the modern human genome, while others were selectively eliminated over generations. This suggests that some Neanderthal gene variants conferred advantages upon modern humans adapting to Eurasian environments, while others were either neutral or detrimental. Among the Neanderthal gene variants that appear to have been beneficial are those associated with skin and hair characteristics that may have aided modern humans in adapting to higher latitudes with reduced sunlight exposure. Genes involved in fat metabolism could have facilitated survival in colder climates, and immune system genes might have provided resistance to pathogens prevalent in Eurasia but absent in Africa. Conversely, there is a notable scarcity of Neanderthal DNA on the X chromosome and in genes related to male fertility, suggesting that male hybrids may have experienced reduced reproductive success. a common phenomenon in hybridization between closely related species. Furthermore, there seems to have been selection against Neanderthal variants of certain genes implicated in brain development, though the implications of this remain unclear. The interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans was not solely a biological event. It must have encompassed social interactions as well. While the exact nature of these encounters is subject to speculation, they clearly involved a degree of social integration sufficient for mating and reproduction to occur. Did Neanderthal individuals integrate into modern human groups? Did modern humans join Neanderthal bands? Were there mixed communities where both species coexisted? The archaeological record offers intriguing clues but few definitive answers. What is evident is that the boundary between the two species was sufficiently permeable to allow for significant genetic exchange. This genetic evidence has necessitated a fundamental reevaluation of the relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals, moving away from a simple replacement model. It now appears to have been a complex process involving both competition and assimilation, as modern human populations expanded and Neanderthal populations declined, likely due to a confluence of factors including climate change, competition, and possibly disease. The remaining Neanderthals may have increasingly joined modern human groups. Their distinctive genetic lineage gradually became diluted, but never entirely extinguished. Archaeological evidence pertaining to interaction between the two species is more equivocal, yet nonetheless intriguing. In several regions of Europe, particularly France and northern Spain, archaeologists have identified cultural traditions that appear to integrate elements of both Neanderthal and modern human technologies. The most renowned of these is the Châtel-Perronian industry, a tool-making tradition found in central France and northern Spain, dating to approximately 40 to 45,000 years ago. Châtel-Perronian tools exhibit a combination of features typical of Neanderthal Mousterian technology, with characteristics more commonly associated with the early modern human Aurignacian industry, particularly in the production of blade tools and bone implements. For numerous years, researchers engaged in considerable debate regarding the Châtel-Perronian. They pondered whether this technological development signified Neanderthals incorporating facets of contemporary human ingenuity through cross-cultural encounters, or conversely, whether modern humans assimilated elements of Neanderthal craftsmanship into their own established traditions. The unearthing of Neanderthal skeletal remains in direct proximity to Châtel-Perronian artifacts at the Arcy-sur site in France, initially appeared to decisively favor the former hypothesis. This discovery strongly suggested Neanderthals were adopting aspects of modern human culture. However, more recent re-examinations of the dating at several crucial locations have introduced complexities to this understanding. It now seems plausible that in certain geographical zones, the Châtel-Perronian culture may have emerged prior to the arrival of modern humans in those areas. This suggests independent innovation on the part of Neanderthals, rather than a process of borrowing from newcomers. In other regions, the temporal overlap between the two hominin species is more pronounced, rendering the possibility of cultural exchange considerably more likely. Regardless of the precise mechanisms at play, it is evident that the dynamic between Neanderthals and modern humans was not solely characterized by competition and eventual replacement, there was demonstrably interaction, genetic intermingling, and potentially the bidirectional transmission of cultural practices. The antiquated narrative of inherently superior modern humans supplanting less advanced Neanderthals has yielded to a far more intricate comprehension of a multifaceted encounter between two highly evolved human lineages. This reevaluated perspective on the relationship between Neanderthals and modern humans opens up intriguing avenues of inquiry concerning the fundamental cognitive and cultural distinctions between these two groups. If Neanderthals possess the capacity to interbreed with modern humans, to adopt or independently devise comparable technologies, and potentially to exchange knowledge, then the extent of their actual differences warrants close examination. Genetic evidence indicates that the two species diverged from a shared progenitor between 500,000 and 700,000 years ago. This represents a significant duration of separate evolutionary development, ample time for considerable biological divergences to manifest, as evidenced by the distinct physical attributes distinguishing Neanderthals from modern humans. Nevertheless, it is crucial to acknowledge that for the majority of this period, both species were evolving as sentient, culturally capable beings within the Homo genus. The disparities between Neanderthals and modern humans are perhaps best understood not as differences in fundamental cognitive potential, but rather as variations in specialized adaptations tailored to distinct environmental conditions and ways of life. Neanderthals were not inherently less intelligent than modern humans. Rather, they possessed a different form of intelligence, with their cognitive faculties shaped by the specific challenges of surviving as Ice Age hunters in Europe. This viewpoint helps to illuminate both the remarkable achievements of Neanderthal culture, encompassing their sophisticated tool-making, their successful adaptation to challenging climates, their evident capacity for symbolic thought, and the distinctions between their cultural progression and that of modern humans. Modern humans, evolving within the more varied ecological niches of Africa, may have developed a greater degree of cultural adaptability and a superior capacity to swiftly modify their behaviors and technologies in response to new circumstances. Such flexibility would have conferred a distinct advantage as they expanded into novel territories across Asia, Australia, and ultimately Europe. This is not to imply they were intellectually superior to Neanderthals, but rather that their cognitive adaptations were better suited to a more migratory and exploratory lifestyle. Neanderthals, in contrast, appear to have cultivated profound specialized knowledge pertinent to specific European environments. Their technological approaches and subsistence strategies were highly efficacious for the prevailing conditions, yet potentially less adaptable to abrupt environmental shifts. Again, this does not signify a lesser degree of intelligence, but rather a distinct adaptive strategy, emphasizing depth of knowledge over breadth. These differing cognitive adaptations may offer insight into why modern humans ultimately proved more successful in navigating the rapid climatic fluctuations that characterize the period between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago. As conditions shifted, modern humans may have been better equipped to adjust their behaviors and toolkits more rapidly. While Neanderthal specialized adaptations became less tenable, the social structures of the two species likely diverged as well. with significant implications for their interactions. Genetic evidence suggests that Neanderthals tended to inhabit relatively small, isolated communities with limited intergroup contact. Such a social organization would have been well suited to environments where resources were dispersed and populations needed to be spread out. However, it may have restricted the diffusion of innovations and rendered them susceptible to localized extinction events. Modern human populations, conversely, appear to have maintained larger social networks with more frequent interactions between groups. This societal structure would have facilitated the dissemination of new ideas, provided a buffer against localized resource scarcity, and potentially conferred a demographic advantage when the two species entered into competition. These divergences in social organization may have played a pivotal role in the ultimate fate of the Neanderthals. As climatic oscillations place stress on local ecosystems and modern humans expanded into Neanderthal territories, the more interconnected modern human communities might have been better equipped to withstand these pressures than the comparatively isolated Neanderthal bands. It is important to emphasize that none of these distinctions imply an inherent superiority of modern humans over Neanderthals. Both species had developed highly effective adaptations to their respective environments. Neanderthals flourished in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, a span far exceeding the existence of our own species. Their eventual disappearance was not attributable to any intrinsic deficiency, but rather to a complex interplay of factors, including environmental change, competition, and demographic challenges. The timing of Neanderthal extinction varied across Europe, with the most recent compelling evidence originating from sites in Gibraltar, dated to approximately 40,000 years ago, and possibly as late as 37,000 years ago in isolated pockets of the Iberian Peninsula. This gradual contraction of their range, rather than an abrupt continental extinction, is consistent with a multifaceted process involving multiple contributing factors rather than a singular decisive cause. The period between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago witnessed dramatic climatic fluctuations, including several severe cold spells known as Heinrich events. These abrupt cooling phases would have placed considerable stress on Neanderthal populations, potentially diminishing the numbers of their preferred prey species and making their high-calorie meat-intensive diet more challenging to sustain. A compelling study published in 2019 employed computer modeling to investigate whether demographic factors alone could have precipitated Neanderthal extinction. The researchers concluded that even in the absence of climate change or competition, the small population size of Neanderthals and their susceptibility to inbreeding depression could have led to their demise. When combined with the pressures of climatic shifts and competition from expanding modern human populations, their fate becomes more comprehensible. The most probable scenario is that all these factors, climate change, competition, demographic challenges, and potentially disease, interacted in intricate ways that differed across various European regions. In some locales, climate change might have been the primary impetus behind Neanderthal decline. In others, direct competition with modern humans could have played a more significant role. Throughout this process, the limited, isolated nature of Neanderthal populations would have rendered them increasingly vulnerable to localized extinction events. As Neanderthal numbers dwindled, the surviving individuals may have increasingly integrated into modern human groups, a phenomenon suggested by genetic evidence of interbreeding. This would not have been a simple unilateral assimilation. On the contrary, the modern humans who encountered Neanderthals would have had a great deal to learn from these highly adapted inhabitants of Ice Age Europe. Neanderthals had accumulated generations of invaluable knowledge regarding European environments, which plants were edible or medicinal, how to track and hunt local game, and where to locate essential resources such as water and stone for tool production. As newcomers to these landscapes, modern humans would have immensely benefited from this local expertise. It is intriguing to contemplate what other aspects of Neanderthal culture might have been passed on to modern humans during this period of contact. Did modern humans acquire hunting techniques from Neanderthals? Did they adopt elements of Neanderthal technology, such as the creation of birch bark tar adhesives? Did they incorporate Neanderthal medicinal practices or spiritual beliefs into their own cultural traditions? The archaeological record offers few definitive answers, but the possibility of such cultural exchange adds another captivating dimension to the narrative of the interaction between these two human species. It was not merely a scenario of modern humans replacing Neanderthals, but a complex process of interaction that potentially encompassed both genetic and cultural exchange. This has profound implications for how we conceptualize human evolution and diversity. It challenges the linear, progressive perspective that has long dominated paleoanthropology. The notion that evolution produced a succession of increasingly advanced human species, culminating in Homo sapiens as the apex of this development. Instead, it proposes a more intricate branching pattern, wherein different human species evolved concurrently, each developing specialized adaptations to specific ecological niches. Neanderthals were not a transitional stage on the path to modern humans, but a distinct lineage within humanity, possessing their own unique evolutionary trajectory. This viewpoint aligns with our current understanding of other members of the human family tree. The discovery of Homo floresiensis, often referred to as the hobbits of Indonesia, and Homo luzonensis in the Philippines, demonstrates that multiple human species coexisted with our own until relatively recently. Furthermore, the identification of the Denisovans, another distinct human species that interbred with both Neanderthals and modern humans, further complicates this picture. Far from the linear march of progress depicted in familiar textbook illustrations, human evolution was more akin to a complex shrub with numerous branches developing in parallel, occasionally interacting and hybridizing, sometimes competing, but each representing a valid and successful adaptation to particular circumstances. Neanderthals thrived in challenging environments for hundreds of thousands of years, sustained by a combination of biological and cultural adaptations. Their remarkable physical strength, the exceptionally robust bodies that have been a focal point of our investigations, was but one facet of a sophisticated and comprehensive adaptation to life in Ice Age Europe. Their legacy endures, not solely in the DNA carried by many of us, but in our escalating appreciation for the diversity of the human experience and the myriad ways of being human. The story of the Neanderthals serves as a reminder that our species' current global dominance is not the inevitable consequence of inherent superiority, but rather the outcome of a complex historical trajectory involving both chance and adaptation. It also prompts profound questions about human identity and uniqueness. If another human species coexisted with our own, until quite recently, a species possessing comparable cognitive faculties, intricate cultural traditions, and the ability to interbreed with us, what does this suggest about our position within the natural world? What might our world be like had Neanderthals survived to the present day? These inquiries gain heightened significance as we contemplate the possibility of encountering non-human intelligence in the future. Whether through artificial intelligence or potential contact with extraterrestrial beings, our experience with Neanderthals suggests that intelligence and complexity can manifest in diverse forms, and that our anthropocentric viewpoint might impede our capacity to recognize and appreciate these differences. The Neanderthals, with their formidable physical prowess, sophisticated minds, and complex cultural adaptations, represent both a mirror and a window. A mirror reflecting aspects of ourselves that we share with these ancient relatives, and a window offering a glimpse into alternative possibilities for human existence. Their narrative is not solely about their identity, but also about ours and what we might have become under different circumstances. As we continue to unearth new evidence regarding these extraordinary beings, our comprehension of them becomes ever richer and more nuanced. The rudimentary caricatures of hunched, grunting figures have given way to a profound and respectful appreciation of Neanderthals as sophisticated, intelligent beings possessing rich cultural traditions and complex social lives. They were truly extraordinary in every conceivable way, and their story continues to fascinate and inform our understanding of what it means to be human. And as we will explore in the concluding segment of our journey, the legacy of the Neanderthals extends far beyond their physical disappearance, influencing not only our biology through the genes we inherited from them, but also our self-perception and our conception of humanity's past and future. Throughout our exploration of Neanderthals, we have uncovered that these ancient humans were remarkable individuals in every sense, not only in terms of their exceptional physical power, but also in their cognitive abilities, technological advancements, and social complexity. Far from the primitive cave dwellers of popular imagination, they were sophisticated humans, perfectly adapted to the challenging environments of Ice Age Europe. However, perhaps the most surprising revelation of the Neanderthal story is how their legacy continues to impact us today. This influence is evident not only through the genes many of us carry, but also through what their existence reveals about human nature and the trajectory of our evolution. In this final chapter, we will delve into the enduring impact of Neanderthals on our biology, our understanding of ourselves, and our vision of humanity's past and future. Let us commence with their most direct legacy, the Neanderthal DNA that persists in many modern humans. When researchers first sequenced the Neanderthal genome in 2010, they made the astonishing discovery that most individuals of non-African descent possess Neanderthal DNA. This provided conclusive evidence that our ancestors did not simply displace Neanderthals, they interbred with them, and we carry the genetic heritage of those encounters. Subsequent investigations have illuminated the intricate pattern of this genetic inheritance. Not all Neanderthal genes were equally likely to be retained within the modern human genome. Some appear to have conferred an advantage and were thus favored by natural selection, while others were gradually eliminated from our gene pool. Among the beneficial Neanderthal genes that many modern humans continue to carry are variants associated with skin and hair characteristics. These may have aided our ancestors in adapting to northern latitudes with reduced sunlight. Neanderthals had inhabited these regions for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans arrived, and they had developed genetic adaptations to cope with decreased UV exposure. Adaptations that proved advantageous to modern humans migrating into similar environments. Other retained Neanderthal genes are implicated in fat metabolism and may have assisted modern humans in adapting to colder climates, where efficient energy storage and utilization were crucial for survival. Still others affect immune function, potentially conferring protection against pathogens prevalent in Eurasia, though not in Africa, thereby granting modern humans a survival advantage as they expanded into new territories. The distribution of Neanderthal DNA in contemporary populations offers an intriguing narrative of human migrations and interactions. Individuals of East Asian heritage typically carry slightly more Neanderthal DNA than Europeans, suggesting multiple instances of interbreeding as modern humans spread across Eurasia. Indigenous populations in sub-Saharan Africa, whose ancestors did not migrate through Eurasia, exhibit little to no Neanderthal DNA, a pattern perfectly consistent with interbreeding having occurred primarily after modern humans departed Africa. Certain Neanderthal gene variants appear to influence traits extending far beyond simple physical adaptations. Specific Neanderthal genes have been linked to aspects of neurological function, immune response, and even mood regulation. One particularly fascinating example is a Neanderthal variant that affects the likelihood of experiencing depression, potentially representing an adaptation to the extended dark winters of northern Europe, where reducing activity during the harshest season might have been beneficial. Other Neanderthal variants have been associated with conditions such as Crohn's disease, type 2 diabetes, and even susceptibility to certain viral infections, including, intriguingly, severe COVID-19. The relationship between these genetic variants and the risk of disease is complex. What may have been adaptive in the Paleolithic environment could have different consequences in our modern world, characterized by dramatically altered diets, lifestyles, and patterns of disease exposure. The pattern of Neanderthal genes that were not retained in the modern human genome is equally revealing. There is a notable paucity of Neanderthal DNA on the X chromosome and in genes related to male fertility, suggesting that male hybrids may have experienced reduced fertility, a common occurrence when closely related species interbreed. This reduced male fertility might help explain why the overall percentage of Neanderthal DNA in modern humans remains relatively low, despite evidence for multiple interbreeding events. There also appears to have been selection against Neanderthal variants of certain genes involved in brain development. The implications of this pattern remain unclear. It could reflect incompatibilities between Neanderthal and modern human neural development, or it might simply be the result of random evolutionary processes unrelated to cognitive function. What is unequivocally clear is that we are, in a very tangible sense, part Neanderthal. Their genetic legacy persists in most non-African populations, influencing various aspects of our biology in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. This biological connection to these ancient relatives compels us to reevaluate the traditional narrative of human origins and the relationship between different human species. However, the legacy of the Neanderthals extends far beyond the genetic contributions they made to our DNA. Their very existence and our progressively deeper understanding of their sophisticated nature have fundamentally altered our perspective on human evolution and diversity. For a significant portion of the 20th century, human evolution was depicted as a linear progression from primitive, ape-like ancestors to increasingly advanced forms, culminating in Homo sapiens as the pinnacle of this process. Neanderthals were relegated to the status of a side branch, an evolutionary dead end that could not compete with our supposedly superior species. This linear, progressive view of human evolution reflected the cultural biases of the era more than the actual empirical evidence. It positioned modern humans, particularly Europeans, who were at the forefront of research, as the inevitable victors of an evolutionary contest, thereby justifying their global dominance as the natural outcome of superior capabilities. The revised understanding of Neanderthals that has emerged in recent decades completely undermines this self-serving narrative. Neanderthals were not primitive or less evolved. They were highly adapted humans whose physical and cultural characteristics were the product of hundreds of thousands of years of successful evolution within specific ecological niches. They were not an evolutionary dead end, but a remarkably successful branch of humanity that thrived for a period far longer than our own species has existed. This revised understanding significantly enhances our broader knowledge of human evolution. Instead of a linear march of progress, the evidence points towards a complex, bushy evolutionary tree with multiple branches developing in parallel, each representing successful adaptations to particular environmental conditions. Neanderthals, with their formidable physical strength and remarkable resilience, were exceptionally well adapted to the demanding conditions of Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years through a strategic combination of biological and cultural adaptations. Their powerful physiques, which have been a central focus of our explorations, constituted just one element of a sophisticated and comprehensive adaptation to life in Ice Age Europe. Their legacy endures, not merely in the genetic material that many of us carry, but in our growing appreciation for the vast spectrum of human experience and the diverse ways in which humanity can manifest. The narrative of the Neanderthals serves as a potent reminder that our species' current preeminence on the planet is not an inevitable consequence of inherent superiority, but rather the result of a complex historical process shaped by both chance and adaptation. It also prompts profound questions regarding human identity and uniqueness. If another human species coexisted alongside ours until relatively recently, possessing comparable cognitive capacities, intricate cultural traditions, and the ability to interbreed with us, what does this reveal about our place in the natural order? What might our world resemble had Neanderthals survived into the present era? These questions assume enhanced significance as we contemplate the potential for encountering non-human intelligence in the future. Whether in the form of artificial intelligence or through potential contact with extraterrestrial life, our experience with Neanderthals suggests that intelligence and complexity can manifest in diverse forms, and that our human-centric perspective may limit our capacity to recognize and appreciate these variations. The Neanderthals, with their imposing physical stature, sophisticated intellects, and intricate cultural adaptations, serve as both a mirror and a window. They are a mirror reflecting aspects of ourselves that we share with these ancient relatives, and a window offering a glimpse into alternative possibilities for what it means to be human. Their story is not solely about their identity, but also about ours, and about what we might have become under different circumstances. As we continue to uncover new evidence pertaining to these remarkable beings, our understanding of them becomes increasingly rich and nuanced. The simplistic caricatures of hunched, grunting individuals have been replaced by a respectful appreciation of Neanderthals as sophisticated, intelligent beings endowed with rich cultural traditions and complex social structures. They were, in every sense, extraordinary beings whose story continues to fascinate and deepen our comprehension of human existence. And as we shall explore in the concluding portion of our journey, the legacy of the Neanderthals extends far beyond their physical demise, influencing not only our biology through the genes we inherited from them, but also our understanding of ourselves and our place within the natural world. Throughout our exploration of Neanderthals, we have discovered that these ancient humans were truly remarkable individuals, not only in their extraordinary physical strength, but also in their cognitive abilities, technological innovations, and social complexity. Far from being the primitive cave dwellers of popular imagination, they were sophisticated humans, perfectly adapted to the harsh environments of Ice Age Europe. However, perhaps the most surprising aspect of the Neanderthal story is how their legacy continues to influence us today. This influence is manifested not only through the genetic material many of us carry, but also through what their existence reveals about human nature and the course of our evolutionary journey. In this final chapter, we will investigate the enduring impact of Neanderthals on our biology, our self-perception, and our vision of humanity's past and future. Let us begin with their most direct legacy, the Neanderthal DNA that persists in many modern humans. When researchers first sequenced the Neanderthal genome in 2010, they made the startling discovery that most individuals of non-African descent possess Neanderthal DNA. This provided definitive proof that our ancestors did not simply displace Neanderthals, they interbred with them, and we carry the genetic inheritance of those encounters. Subsequent research has elucidated the complex pattern of this genetic inheritance. Not all Neanderthal genes were equally likely to be incorporated into the modern human genome. Some appear to have been advantageous and were thus favored by natural selection, while others were progressively eliminated from our gene pool. Among the beneficial Neanderthal genes that many modern humans still carry are variants related to skin and hair characteristics, which may have assisted our ancestors in adapting to northern latitudes with reduced sunlight. Neanderthals had been residing in these environments for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans arrived, and they had developed genetic adaptations to cope with diminished UV exposure. Adaptations that proved beneficial to modern humans migrating into similar locales. Other retained Neanderthal genes are involved in fat metabolism and may have helped modern humans adapt to colder climates where efficient energy storage and utilization were essential for survival. Still others affect immune function, potentially offering enhanced resistance to pathogens prevalent in Eurasia but not in Africa, thereby providing modern humans with a survival advantage as they expanded into new territories. The distribution of Neanderthal DNA within modern populations tells an intriguing story about human migrations and interactions. Individuals of East Asian descent typically carry slightly more Neanderthal DNA than Europeans, suggesting multiple episodes of interbreeding as modern humans dispersed across Eurasia. Indigenous populations in sub-Saharan Africa, whose ancestors did not migrate through Eurasia, exhibit little to no Neanderthal DNA, a pattern that perfectly aligns with expectations if interbreeding occurred primarily after modern humans left Africa. Some Neanderthal gene variants appear to influence traits that extend well beyond simple physical adaptations. Certain Neanderthal genes have been linked to aspects of neurological function, immune response, and even mood regulation. One particularly compelling example is a Neanderthal variant that affects the risk of depression, potentially representing an adaptation to the long, dark winters of Northern Europe, where reducing activity during the harshest season might have been advantageous. Other Neanderthal variants have been associated with conditions such as Crohn's disease, type 2 diabetes, and even susceptibility to certain viral infections, including, remarkably, severe COVID-19. The relationship between these genetic variants and disease risk is intricate. What may have been adaptive in the Paleolithic environment could have different effects in our modern world, with its drastically altered diet, lifestyle, and exposure to diseases. The pattern of Neanderthal genes that were not retained in the modern human genome is equally informative. There is a noticeable scarcity of Neanderthal DNA on the X chromosome and in genes related to male fertility, suggesting that male hybrids may have experienced reduced fertility, a common occurrence in encounters between closely related species. This reduced male fertility might help account for why the overall percentage of Neanderthal DNA in modern humans remains relatively low, despite evidence of multiple interbreeding events. There also appears to have been selection against Neanderthal variants of certain genes involved in brain development. The implications of this pattern remain uncertain. It could indicate incompatibilities between Neanderthal and modern human neural development, or it might simply be the consequence of random evolutionary processes unrelated to cognitive function. What is clear is that we are, in a very real sense, part Neanderthal. Their genetic legacy lives on in most non-African populations, influencing various aspects of our biology in ways we are only beginning to understand. This biological connection to these ancient relatives compels us to reconsider the traditional narrative of human origins and the relationship between different human species. However, the legacy of Neanderthals extends far beyond the genes they contributed to our DNA. Their very existence and our growing comprehension of their sophisticated nature have fundamentally reshaped how we think about human evolution and diversity. For much of the 20th century, human evolution was often depicted as a linear progression, moving from primitive, ape-like ancestors to progressively more advanced forms, culminating in Homo sapiens as the ultimate achievement. Neanderthals were relegated to the status of a side branch, an evolutionary dead end incapable of competing with our supposedly superior species. This linear, progressive view of human evolution mirrored the cultural biases of the time more than it reflected the actual evidence. It positioned modern humans, particularly Europeans, who were at the forefront of research, as the inevitable winners of an evolutionary struggle, thereby justifying their global dominance as a natural outcome of superior capabilities. The revised understanding of Neanderthals that has emerged in recent decades completely dismantles this self-serving narrative. Neanderthals were not primitive or less evolved. They were highly adapted humans whose physical and cultural characteristics were the result of hundreds of thousands of years of successful evolution in specific ecological niches. They were not an evolutionary dead end, but a remarkably successful branch of humanity that thrived for a period significantly longer than our own species has existed. This revised perspective significantly enhances our broader understanding of human evolution. Rather than a linear march of progress, the evidence reveals a complex branching evolutionary tree with multiple lineages developing concurrently, each representing successful adaptations to particular circumstances. Neanderthals were exceptionally well equipped for the challenging environments of Ice Age Europe, thriving for hundreds of thousands of years through a combination of biological and cultural adaptations. Their formidable physical strength, the exceptionally robust bodies that have been a focus of much research, was merely one component of a complex and sophisticated adaptation to life in Ice Age Europe. Their legacy endures not only in the DNA carried by many of us, but also in our increasing appreciation for the diversity of human experience and the multitude of ways to be human. The story of the Neanderthals serves as a reminder that our species' current global dominance is not the inevitable outcome of inherent superiority, but rather the result of a complex historical process involving both chance and adaptation. It also raises profound questions about human identity and uniqueness. If another human species coexisted with our own until relatively recently, a species possessing comparable cognitive capabilities, complex cultural traditions, and the ability to interbreed with us, what does this imply about our place in nature? What might our world be like if Neanderthals had survived to the present day? These questions gain heightened significance as we consider the possibility of encountering non-human intelligence in the future, whether through artificial intelligence or potential contact with extraterrestrial beings. Our experience with Neanderthals suggests that intelligence and complexity can manifest in diverse forms, and that our human-centric viewpoint may limit our ability to recognize and appreciate these differences. The Neanderthals, with their powerful bodies, sophisticated minds, and complex cultural adaptations, represent both a mirror and a window. They are a mirror reflecting aspects of ourselves that we share with these ancient relatives, and a window offering a glimpse into alternative possibilities for human existence. Their story is not just about who they were, but about who we are and who we might have been under different circumstances. As we continue to uncover new evidence about these remarkable beings, our understanding of them grows ever richer and more nuanced. The crude caricatures of hunched, grunting individuals have been replaced by a profound and respectful appreciation of Neanderthals as sophisticated, intelligent beings with rich cultural traditions, and complex social lives. They were, in every respect, extraordinary individuals whose story continues to fascinate and inform our understanding of what it means to be human. And as we will explore in the final part of our journey, the legacy of the Neanderthals extends far beyond their physical disappearance, influencing not only our biology through the genes we inherited from them, but also our understanding of ourselves and our place in the natural world. Throughout our exploration of Neanderthals, we have discovered that these ancient humans were truly exceptional beings, not only in terms of their remarkable physical strength, but also in their cognitive abilities, technological innovations, and social complexity. Far from being the primitive cave dwellers of popular imagination, they were sophisticated humans, perfectly adapted to the harsh environments of Ice Age Europe. However, perhaps the most surprising aspect of the Neanderthal story is how their legacy continues to influence us today. This influence is evident not only through the genes many of us carry, but also through what their existence reveals about human nature and the course of our evolution. In this final chapter, we will examine the lasting impact of Neanderthals on our biology, our self-understanding, and our vision of humanity's past and future. Let us begin with their most direct legacy, the Neanderthal DNA that persists in many modern humans. When researchers first sequenced the Neanderthal genome in 2010, they made the startling discovery that most individuals of non-African descent carry Neanderthal DNA. This provided conclusive evidence that our ancestors did not simply replace Neanderthals. They interbred with them, and we carry the genetic legacy of those encounters. Subsequent research has revealed the intricate pattern of this genetic inheritance. Not all Neanderthal genes were equally likely to be retained within the modern human genome. Some appear to have conferred an advantage and were thus favored by natural selection, while others were gradually eliminated from our gene pool. Among the beneficial Neanderthal genes that many modern humans still carry are variants related to skin and hair characteristics, which may have helped our ancestors adapt to northern latitudes with reduced sunlight. Neanderthals had been living in these environments for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans arrived, and they had developed genetic adaptations to cope with diminished UV exposure, adaptations that proved beneficial to modern humans migrating into similar regions. Other retained Neanderthal genes are involved in fat metabolism and may have assisted modern humans in adapting to colder climates, where efficient energy storage and utilization were crucial for survival. Still others affect immune function, potentially offering enhanced resistance to pathogens prevalent in Eurasia, but not in Africa, thereby providing modern humans with a survival advantage as they expanded into new territories. The distribution of Neanderthal DNA in modern populations tells an intriguing story about human migrations and interactions. Individuals of East Asian descent typically carry slightly more Neanderthal DNA than Europeans, suggesting multiple episodes of interbreeding as modern humans dispersed across Eurasia. Indigenous populations in sub-Saharan Africa, whose ancestors did not migrate through Eurasia, exhibit little to no Neanderthal DNA, a pattern that perfectly aligns with expectations if interbreeding occurred primarily after modern humans left Africa. Certain Neanderthal gene variants appear to influence traits that extend far beyond simple physical adaptations. Specific Neanderthal genes have been linked to aspects of neurological function, immune response, and even mood regulation. One particularly fascinating example is a Neanderthal variant that affects the risk of depression, potentially representing an adaptation to the long, dark winters of Northern Europe, where reducing activity during the harshest season might have been advantageous. Other Neanderthal variants have been associated with conditions such as Crohn's disease, type 2 diabetes, and even susceptibility to certain viral infections, including, remarkably, severe COVID-19. The relationship between these genetic variants and disease risk is complex. What may have been adaptive in the Paleolithic environment could have different consequences in our modern world, with its drastically altered diet, lifestyle, and exposure to diseases. The pattern of Neanderthal genes that were not retained in the modern human genome is equally informative. There is a noticeable scarcity of Neanderthal DNA on the X chromosome and in genes related to male fertility, suggesting that male hybrids may have experienced reduced fertility, a common occurrence in encounters between closely related species. This reduced male fertility might help account for why the overall percentage of Neanderthal DNA in modern humans remains relatively low, despite evidence of multiple interbreeding events. There also appears to have been selection against Neanderthal variants of certain genes involved in brain development. The implications of this pattern remain uncertain. It could indicate incompatibilities between Neanderthal and modern human neural development, or it might simply be the consequence of random evolutionary processes unrelated to cognitive function. What is unequivocally clear is that we are, in a very real sense, part Neanderthal. Their genetic legacy persists in most non-African populations, influencing various aspects of our biology in ways we are only beginning to understand. This biological connection to these ancient relatives compels us to reconsider the traditional narrative of human origins and the relationship between different human species. However, the legacy of Neanderthals extends far beyond the genes they contributed to our DNA. Their very existence and our growing comprehension of their sophisticated nature have fundamentally reshaped how we think about human evolution and diversity. For much of the 20th century, human evolution was often depicted as a linear progression, moving from primitive, ape-like ancestors to progressively more advanced forms, culminating in Homo sapiens as the ultimate achievement. Neanderthals were relegated to the status of a side branch, an evolutionary dead end, incapable of competing with our supposedly superior species. This linear, progressive view of human evolution mirrored the cultural biases of the time more than it reflected the actual evidence. It positioned modern humans, particularly Europeans, who were at the forefront of research, as the inevitable winners of an evolutionary struggle, thereby justifying their global dominance as a natural outcome of superior capabilities. The revised understanding of Neanderthals that has emerged in recent decades completely dismantles this self-serving narrative. Neanderthals were not primitive or less evolved. They were highly adapted humans whose physical and cultural characteristics were the result of hundreds of thousands of years of successful evolution in specific ecological niches. They were not an evolutionary dead end, but a remarkably successful branch of humanity that thrived for a period significantly longer than our own species has existed. Humankind's story isn't a linear progression culminating in us today. Rather, we are merely the final surviving offshoot on a once far more varied human family tree. This updated perspective carries significant implications for our understanding of human identity and what sets us apart. If another distinct human species coexisted with ours until relatively recently, possessing comparable cognitive abilities, intricate cultural practices, and the capacity to reproduce with us, what does this reveal about our place in the natural world? The very essence of what makes us human might not be exclusive to Homo sapiens, but shared across several species within the Homo genus. The narrative of the Neanderthals also compels us to re-examine our notions of advancement and adaptation. Their disappearance was not a consequence of being inherently less developed or capable than contemporary humans. Instead, it stemmed from a complex confluence of factors, including shifts in climate, demographic pressures, and the specific historical circumstances of their encounters with our ancestral populations. Had conditions been different? Had the climate remained more stable? Had modern humans arrived in Europe at a dissimilar juncture? Or had Neanderthal populations been larger and more interconnected? The outcome could have been altered. It is conceivable that today we might inhabit a world where Neanderthals persist as a distinct group, or where interbreeding had progressed further, yielding a more blended genetic heritage from both species. These hypothetical scenarios transcend mere idle conjecture. They underscore the contingent nature of evolutionary history. Our species' current global prominence is not the predetermined result of innate superiority, but rather the product of a multifaceted historical process influenced by both random chance and effective adaptation. The Neanderthals serve as a potent reminder that evolution lacks a predetermined course or ultimate objective. Its outcome is diversity, not a directed march towards some idealized form. This refined understanding of human evolution has tangible consequences for our contemporary approaches to conservation and the preservation of biodiversity. If the tapestry of human diversity once encompassed multiple species, each with its unique adaptations and aptitudes, then the loss of that diversity represents a considerable curtailment of evolutionary potential. Our species now stands solitary as the sole surviving member of our genus, having relinquished the alternative perspectives and adaptive strategies embodied by other human species. This reduction in diversity renders us more susceptible as a species. When all humans share fundamentally similar adaptations and vulnerabilities, we become more prone to catastrophic threats that exploit these commonalities. The existence of a variety of human species, each possessing distinct strengths and adaptive mechanisms, would have offered greater resilience against such perils, whether they manifest as disease, climate change, or other challenges. The story of the Neanderthals offers a sobering reflection on how swiftly a successful and well-established species can vanish when circumstances shift. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals held sway as the preeminent human species across Europe. Their sturdy physiques and sophisticated cultures were perfectly attuned to the rigors of the Ice Age. Yet, within mere millennia of modern humans entering their territories, a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, they had disappeared as a distinct population. Their fate provokes uncomfortable questions regarding the future of our own species. Much like the Neanderthals, we have developed highly specialized adaptations suited to particular environmental and societal conditions. Our technological advancements, our social frameworks, and our modes of existence are contingent upon a relatively stable climate and predictable access to resources. As we confront escalating climate change and environmental degradation, the rapid demise of the Neanderthals stands as a stark warning about the potential precariousness of even long-established and successful species. However, the Neanderthal saga is more than just a cautionary account. It also presents a wellspring of optimism and broadened horizons. The evidence of interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans challenges simplistic definitions of species boundaries and suggests a more fluid, interconnected view of life and evolutionary processes. It reminds us that differences need not preclude meaningful interaction, genetic exchange, and the potential for cultural sharing. This perspective holds relevance for present-day discussions concerning human diversity and identity. If our forebears could recognize Neanderthals, with their distinctive appearances and separate evolutionary trajectories, as potential mates and social companions, perhaps we can more readily acknowledge the fundamental commonalities that lie beneath the relatively minor variations among contemporary human populations. The Neanderthal narrative also expands our conceptualization of what it means to be human. For centuries, Western philosophy and theology positioned humans as fundamentally distinct from other animals, uniquely endowed with superior cognitive abilities, moral consciousness, and the capacity for cultural development and technological innovation. The revelation that Neanderthals shared many of these supposedly exclusive human traits points towards a more continuous spectrum of intelligence and complexity across species. This continuity extends in both directions, not only to other human species like the Neanderthals, but potentially to non-human animals as well. If Neanderthals, whose brains were organized somewhat differently from our own, could cultivate complex societies, develop sophisticated technologies, and possibly engage in symbolic expression, then perhaps we ought to be more receptive to recognizing similar capabilities in other intelligent species, such as cetaceans, elephants, or great apes, each possessing their own unique neurological configurations honed for their specific environmental challenges. The acknowledgement that intelligence and complexity can manifest in diverse forms has implications for how we might engage with non-human intelligence in the future, whether through artificial intelligence or potential encounters with extraterrestrial life. The Neanderthal example suggests that we should exercise caution in imposing our specific cognitive paradigms as the sole valid model of intelligence, and instead remain open to recognizing and valuing varied manifestations of complex thought and behavior. Through archaeological discoveries and sophisticated analytical methods, our comprehension of the Neanderthals, our ancient kin, continues to deepen and become more refined. Each new piece of evidence, be it a skillfully crafted tool, indications of symbolic behavior, or insights gleaned from ancient DNA, adds another element to the intricate puzzle of their existence and their way of life. Recent technological advancements have markedly accelerated this process. Improvements in DNA extraction and analytical techniques have enabled researchers to retrieve genetic material from increasingly ancient specimens, including some dating back over 100,000 years. These breakthroughs have not only unveiled the Neanderthal genome, but also provided evidence of other extinct human species, such as the Denisovans, known almost exclusively through their genetic makeup rather than physical remains. New dating methodologies have furnished more precise timelines for Neanderthal sites, allowing researchers to correlate archaeological findings with specific climatic events and potential interactions with modern humans. Advanced imaging technologies have revealed details of Neanderthal anatomy previously undetectable through conventional methods, from the structure of their inner ears to the developmental patterns of their teeth and bones. Perhaps most remarkably, scientists are beginning to extract and analyze proteins and other biomolecules from ancient specimens, potentially illuminating aspects of Neanderthal biology not preserved in their DNA. Analysis of dental calculus, the hardened plaque found on teeth, has offered insights into Neanderthal diets, health, and potential medicinal practices that were previously inaccessible through traditional archaeological approaches. These technological leaps promise to continuously expand our understanding of Neanderthals. In the years to come, we may soon be capable of reconstructing facets of their sensory experiences, discerning how they perceived their world through sight, smell, and hearing. We might gain knowledge about currently unseen aspects of their biology, from their gut microbiomes to their hormonal fluctuations. Furthermore, we may be able to track shifts in their genetic diversity and population structure over time, revealing how they adapted to climatic variations and other challenges throughout their extensive history. As our knowledge of Neanderthals grows, so does our appreciation for their existence. They were not rudimentary ancestors to modern humans, but rather sophisticated beings possessing their own unique adaptations and capabilities. The crude caricatures of hunched, grunting individuals have given way to a more respectful understanding of Neanderthals as complex, intelligent beings who thrived in challenging environments through a combination of biological and cultural adaptations. This revised perspective is gradually permeating popular culture. Recent portrayals of Neanderthals in documentaries, museum exhibitions, and even fictional narratives have moved beyond the stereotypical caveman image towards more accurate and respectful representations that highlight their humanity and sophistication. These cultural representations hold significance. They shape public perception and influence our thinking about human diversity and evolution. The Neanderthals have also become central to ongoing scientific and philosophical debates concerning human origins, species distinctions, and the fundamental nature of intelligence. Their story challenges us to reassess deeply ingrained assumptions about progress, superiority, and the very definition of what it means to be human. They remind us that our current status as the sole surviving human species is a recent and potentially transient situation. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, multiple human species coexisted on Earth. This viewpoint fosters a degree of humility regarding our position in the natural world. Modern humans are not the inevitable zenith of evolutionary advancement, but simply the last remaining branch of a once more diverse human family tree. Our global dominance is not the consequence of inherent superiority, but rather a complex historical trajectory involving both adaptation and chance. Moreover, the sophisticated nature of Neanderthals suggests that many capabilities we deem uniquely human, from technological innovation to symbolic expression, possess deep evolutionary roots and may have been shared across multiple species. Concurrently, the Neanderthal narrative illuminates the remarkable adaptive capacity of the Homo genus, our broader human lineage. Both Neanderthals and modern humans developed complex cultural and technological systems that enabled them to flourish in challenging environments. From the frigid expanses of Ice Age Europe to the varied terrains of Africa and beyond, this adaptability, fueled by the synergy of biological evolution and cultural innovation, has been a defining characteristic of our lineage for eons. The fate of the Neanderthals, their eventual disappearance as a distinct population after hundreds of thousands of years of successful adaptation, serves as both a cautionary reminder and an illustration of the dynamic nature of evolution. No species, however firmly established or successful, is guaranteed perpetual existence. Shifting environmental conditions, competition, demographic challenges, and sheer chance can lead to extinction, even for highly adapted and intelligent beings. For our own species now confronting accelerating climate change, environmental degradation, and other unprecedented challenges, the Neanderthal story offers both a warning and a source of inspiration. It cautions us about the potential vulnerability of even long-established species when circumstances transform rapidly. Yet it also underscores the remarkable adaptability inherent in humans, our capacity to develop novel technologies, social structures, and ways of life in response to evolving conditions. The pivotal question is whether we can harness this adaptability with conscious intent, employing our understanding of the past to make judicious choices for our future. Can we glean lessons from the Neanderthals, both from their successes and their eventual disappearance, as we navigate the complexities of the Anthropocene? One crucial lesson derived from the Neanderthal narrative is the significance of diversity, encompassing both biological and cultural dimensions. Evidence suggests that Neanderthals maintained relatively small, isolated populations with limited genetic diversity, potentially increasing their susceptibility to extinction events. Conversely, greater connectivity and interbreeding between groups would have fostered enhanced resilience. Similarly, the multiplicity of human cultures and knowledge systems today represents an invaluable asset for addressing intricate challenges. Diverse cultural traditions offer varied perspectives, reservoirs of knowledge, and adaptive strategies that collectively broaden our species' capacity to respond. Just as interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans may have augmented our ancestors' adaptability by incorporating beneficial Neanderthal genetic variants, the exchange and integration of diverse cultural knowledge can bolster our collective ability to confront contemporary issues. Another vital lesson lies in the Neanderthals' remarkable capacity for sustainability. For hundreds of thousands of years, they sustained stable populations in equilibrium with their environments, never reaching population densities or levels of resource consumption that would precipitate ecological collapse. Their technologies, while advanced, relied on renewable materials and processes that left minimal lasting impact on the landscape. This stands in stark contrast to our current predicament, where exponential population growth and resource consumption are pushing planetary systems towards critical thresholds. The Neanderthals demonstrate that it is possible to cultivate sophisticated cultures and technologies without inflicting the kind of environmental devastation that characterizes the industrial and post-industrial eras. Their example challenges us to redefine progress in terms that prioritize sustainability and harmony with natural systems. Perhaps the most profound lesson gleaned from the Neanderthal story is the reminder that we are part of a far grander and more intricate human saga than we often acknowledge. Our species' current global ascendancy represents merely the latest chapter in a lengthy chronicle of human evolution and adaptation spanning millions of years and encompassing numerous species with distinct capabilities and lifestyles. As we advance into an uncertain future, the Neanderthals remind us of both the remarkable resilience of the human lineage and the potential precariousness of even long-established species. They prompt us to reconsider the essence of being human and to recognize the intrinsic value of diversity, both biological and cultural, in bolstering our collective resilience. Their legacy resonates not only in the genetic contributions they left behind, but also in our expanding conceptualization of humanity and our place within the natural world. They were not merely biological anomalies, possessing exceptional physical strength. Instead, they were sophisticated, intelligent beings embodying an alternative expression of humanity. Their story enriches our understanding of what it means to be human and broadens our vision of what might lie ahead for our species. The next time you look into a mirror, consider that for many individuals, a small yet significant portion of what you see reflects the genetic heritage of these extraordinary ancient humans. The Neanderthals are not merely a captivating chapter in our evolutionary past. They are an integral part of who we are today. Their genes and their narrative are interwoven into the very fabric of our biology and our self-perception. And as we confront the multifaceted challenges of the 21st century, ranging from climate change and pandemics to technological disruption and societal transformation, the Neanderthals offer a valuable perspective that balances caution with optimism. They caution us about the potential vulnerability of even successful species when circumstances shift rapidly. However, they also remind us of the remarkable adaptability inherent in the human lineage and our capacity to thrive in challenging environments through a combination of biological and cultural innovation. Their story continues to unfold, with new discoveries shedding further light on their existence and ways of life. Each finding contributes another piece to the intricate mosaic of our shared human heritage and expands our comprehension of what it signifies to be human. The Neanderthals, once relegated to the status of primitive brutes, have emerged as sophisticated, complex beings whose legacy deepens our appreciation for human diversity and potential. They were indeed extraordinary beings, not in the dismissive sense the term is sometimes employed, but in the sense of being remarkable individuals whose physical and cognitive adaptations enabled them to thrive in some of the planet's most formidable environments. Their story deserves to be recounted not as a mere footnote in human evolution, but as a remarkable chapter in its own right. It is the tale of another form of human who walked the earth alongside our ancestors, and whose legacy endures in our genes and in our growing appreciation for the multifaceted spectrum of human experience.